tasks that I had to do yesterday in the evening. So does anybody need any time to read the late pages? Councillor Mason. Okay, all right, that's fine. So just a few bits and pieces. So members of the public are entitled to attend this meeting as observers for all those items taken in open session. Please note the meeting is being recorded. If you wish to record the meeting yourself, then please give due regard to the Council's protocol on audio-visual recording and photography at public meetings. Can I remind members and officers to speak clearly and audibly when addressing the meeting? If the fire alarms sound, it will be for real. Please exit the chamber by the emergency exits located at the entrance to and at the rear of the chamber and congregate in the visitors' car park. And the ladies and gentlemen's toilets is down the corridor on your left. So I'm going to move swiftly on. Apologies for absence. Do members need a bit? I know Councillor Mason's reading late pages. Do any members need a few minutes to read the late pages? Because it looks like I'm going to have to get IT down to look at the sound because members of the public gallery can't hear. Right, we will resume. So apologies for absence, please.
Apologies, sorry, I'm out of breath. Apologies from Councillor. Sorry, what was that?
Just carry on.
Apologies from Councillor Joy Andrews and Councillor Mason is subbing.
Thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting from the 24th of October. Have all members seen the minutes? Are all members happy with those minutes? Could I have a proposer, please, and a seconder? Councillor Taylor proposed, Councillor Baker seconding. Are we accepting the minutes by general affirmation? Yeah, thank you very much. And Councillor Mason will be abstaining because he wasn't here. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Do members, any members have a declaration of interest to make? No, thank you. No declarations. And then I'll move on to the items on the agenda. So item 4 is application number ZB24/01340/full. This is for the construction of 8 dwellings and garages, formation of a new access and associated works at land west of Alwood House, West Lane, Stillington, North Yorkshire, on behalf of Ambleside Homes. We do have a speaker, Mr. Saddington, and that will be for a time of 3 minutes. And I'm going to hand over to the officer, Connor. Thanks, Connor.
Thank you, Chair. Before we get started, there are a number of items within the update list. Chief among them, the response from Highways in reply to the consultation we sent out following receipt of some amended plans, which included alterations to the highway. Within the response, there are a number of new conditions which are intended to supersede the former response by Highways on the 18th of October 2024. Those conditions relate to new and altered private access or verge crossings, the closing of the existing access, delivery of off-site highways works, provision of approved access turning and parking areas, and a construction phase management plan. All of those have conditions. Also included within the update list was the officer response to the Highways response. 2 seconds. Which informed that conditions 1, 4, and 6 should replace within the update list should replace conditions 6, 7, and 8 of the published officer report as updated versions. And some discussion around the approach of tackling the securing of off-site highways works, with the preferred approach being to secure these via Section 106 rather than via condition, as put forward by Highways. In addition to the updates within the update list, there's a verbal update. I'm sure that members are probably aware that the MPPF has been updated in the last week. And so the report has been checked for compliance with that. The sole mention of an MPPF paragraph within the report appears to be consistent with the new version, and the weighting afforded to various elements within the application is also consistent with the weighting that is within the new MPPF. So the application last time was deferred for a number of reasons. One was to look at the relationship between Unit 1 and Alwood House to the east of the site, particularly with regard to the first floor windows. Also, the looking at pedestrian safety and highway safety in general, and whether or not a scheme could be formulated in order to tackle that, and also the protection of a large tree within the site. Those have all been addressed. The agent has provided plans to that remove the first floor windows from Unit 1, and also a scheme relating to the provision of a public footpath, and also the alteration of the 30-mile-an-hour zone. There's also been discussions with the council's agricultural officer with regards to the protection of the large tree. Sorry, those discussions are planned rather than having already taken place. Sorry, so the application is for the construction of 8 new houses and garages and associated works to the west of Stillington. The site is on the western edge of Stillington. Despite the relatively close proximity to the settlement, it's considered to be set within the open countryside. Stillington's built form is considered to end at Town End Pond and Westview. To the west of the site, there is the Shippens, a development which followed on from a prior notification Class Q approval, and to the east is Alwood House. To the north is open countryside, and with the field itself forming part of a medieval strip field system that is common within the area. The key policy consideration in terms of principle is policy S5, which discusses the council's approach to development within the countryside within the former Hambleton area. The policy largely discourages the siting of development within the open countryside. The site, despite being in the open countryside, is approximately 24 metres from Stillington's built form. Another policy consideration is policy EG8 that asks that development not unacceptably harm the surrounding area or the immunity of neighbouring properties. In terms of site history, there's already been an application for housing on the site. It was refused in 2018, and that was based on a failure to reflect the character and form of the settlement and the extension of the village into the open countryside. It's considered that the conversion of the Shippens, which took place after this, changes the perception of that western approach to the village and its relationship to the open countryside. Next slide, sorry. The field is formerly associated with the field to the immediate north and is currently not cropped. As you can see from the slide, it's relatively even in terms of land levels, and there's a large oak tree in the northwest corner of the site. That oak tree, as discussed, is subject to planned discussions between the officer and the agricultural officer, with the view to placing a tree preservation order upon it. It's considered a relatively strong contender, and it's considered that that will likely be the outcome. Next slide, sir. So the site is within grade 3 in terms of agricultural land classification. However, it's uncertain as to whether this represents grade 3 or 3B land. Next slide, sir. So the application is for 8 dwellings. This includes 2 affordable units marked out on the slide to the southeast of the site. There's a mixture of proposed dwelling sizes in terms of bedrooms, with one bedroom unit, 4 2-bedroom units, 2 3-bedroom units, and 1 4-bedroom units. The proposed tenure for the affordable housing is 1 unit being offered as discount market property and the other for social rent. There is to be a commuted sum secured by Section 106 for the remaining 0.4 affordable units required for compliance with policy HG3. Prior to the previous committee, we were trying to get an exact figure from housing. They give us the means in which to calculate that to an extent, but not the exact figure. We still haven't got that from them, but it can and will form part of the discussion around the wording of the Section 106. Part of the proposal is to alter the existing access, which would be partially closed up and partially used as a access for the public footpath, which you can see within this amended plan here, running along the southern portion of the site from east to west. It includes an access from the Shippens across the current site, and then from the current site south across the road and to the west there to join the village. That route was chosen partially to limit the impact of the footpath upon the character and appearance of the countryside, with the vast majority of it being contained within the site and behind the screening offered by the hedgerow, and to limit the amount of intervention in the existing verge, which is limited purely to that section leading south from the site and from east to west along the southern portion of the road. The crossing does feature tactile crossing points, and as you can see from the big orange arrow pointing eastwards, no, westwards, sorry, the speed limit is also going to move approximately 130 meters to the northwest, allowing a reasonable amount of room for vehicles to slow down before approaching the pedestrian crossing point and the proposed new access into the site. In terms of securing this, the council's preferred approach would be via Section 106. In terms of so it would, the thinking is that it would help due to the fact that a financial contribution will be required in order to go through a process of consultation which needs to be enacted prior to the speed limit being able to be moved. We're also going to, we already have a Section 106, we already have a requirement for a Section 106, so it's not considered to be unreasonable in the broader sense. In terms of securing those benefits, the footpath is considered to be a relatively simple thing to gain. In terms of the movement of the speed limit, because there is that consultation process which takes place outside of planning's remit, it's done via the Highways Department. It's not something that can be categorically stated will be an end result of the scheme. Speaking to Highways, they've said that it's very unlikely not to succeed, but that they can 100% guarantee that it will be something that can take place. Next slide, please, sorry. So this is just a series of site sections and a street scene showing the existing site. The upper image shows the street scene from West Lane, and sorry, next slide, sorry. Next slide, sorry. So this recreates the previous slide, but shows the screening provided by the established hedgerow, which mitigates the visual impact of the development somewhat. Slide 9. So these are the affordable units. They're broadly similar in appearance to the remainder of the scheme. So previously, Unit 1 had two gable windows on the western elevation, or the eastern elevation, sorry. These have now been removed from the scheme in order to provide greater neighbour amenity to Alwood House to the east. Next slide, sorry. So this is Unit 3. Unit 4, as you can see from the proposed designs, they're relatively well considered. They incorporate a number of faux agricultural elements to provide visual interest and to tie the development to that agricultural countryside character. Yes. These are just examples of the associated development, again, tying into that agricultural, that rural character, to try and limit the juxtaposition between the domestic and the agricultural rural scene. You can see the southern and eastern site boundaries here, both are well established. So this shows where the bulk of the new footpath is going to be located along that hedgerow boundary there. Next slide, sir. So this shows the northeast of the site, or rather the site looking northeast, and the countryside beyond. And this is looking north from within the site, again showing that relationship to the countryside. This is the Shippens to the west. The scheme has been designed so that it can be read as a larger development with a visual tie to the Shippens. So in terms of its built relationship to neighbouring development, there's quite a strong one there and quite a positive one. As previously mentioned, the Shippens, which is currently cut off in pedestrian terms from the remainder of the village, will be connected via the new footpath to the village. Again, this is the access. This is the current access to be partially closed up and to be used as part of the footpath. And this is the Shippens again. So this is looking in from the site of the proposed footpath. As you can see, the verge is very green, and to have the footpath go alongside the road would introduce a greater impact into that rural character. And this shows the context as you come into the village, with the Shippens on the left of the image there. The proposed access will be, I think, around 6 meters further along from the current access serving the Shippens. And the footpath is to cross the road further along. So that's one, I think, yeah. Yes, sorry, that's everything. Thank you.
Thanks, Connor. We do have a speaker, I think, this morning, Mr. Staddington. Mr. Staddington, if you would like to come forward, we've done this before. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Staddington.
Good morning, everyone. I'm speaking in support of the application today. As you know, the application was deferred at committee in October to allow for the submission of further information relating to a number of issues, including highway safety, neighbour amenity, and the protection of the oak tree at the back of the site. In response, we've submitted an amended plan to show a footpath running from the Shippens through the application site at the back of the hedgerow, crossing the road and connecting to the existing footpath on the southern side of West Lane. Various safety measures are incorporated and include tactile paving, dropped curbs and a personnel gate into the site. We've also agreed to the 30 mph zone being extended further 130 metres to the west, and there would be a financial contribution from the applicant to ensure that that's delivered. I understand that the local highway authority has confirmed support for those highway improvements, so a definite positive improvement since the October committee. In response to the concerns raised by the occupiers of Alwood House, we've removed the windows from the side elevation of plot 1, which were looking towards their side elevation, and we believe that resolves that overlooking issue. Again, a positive improvement since the October committee. The applicant has confirmed that the oak tree would be retained as part of the scheme, but equally happy for that to be controlled through a tree preservation order should members so wish. We've provided as much information as possible to the satisfaction of your officers, and their recommendation continues to be that of approval. We were heartened to hear members' complimentary comments at the last committee, as the design team has worked hard to present a well-designed scheme that would become an attractive place to live. Our aim is to create an aesthetically pleasing scheme that stands the test of time. The proposed layout combines traditional cottage-style properties at the front of the site and a mews arrangement to the rear, which reflects the traditional characteristics of a farmstead. The layout would preserve views of the open countryside through the site to the north, and we've taken great care to maintain existing landscape features such as the hedge at the front, and we would deliver the 10% net gain in biodiversity. The scheme would increase choice and availability of new homes in the village and provide a mix that would benefit local people, including bungalows, smaller 1 and 2 bed units and affordable homes. The proposal would be built to very high standards and provide jobs for local tradespeople and suppliers. Public benefits include SIL contribution of £75,000, 2 affordable housing units, a commuted sum for the balance. Stillington hasn't really benefited from any affordable homes since 2014, and this would help to plug the gap. We trust that we've suitably addressed the issues raised in October, and subject to a signing of a Section 106 agreement, hope that you'll grant planning permission. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Right, I will open it up for questions, although I'm just surprised if there are many. Councillor Taylor, or are there any questions? Or Councillor Mason?
I only have one small one. The MPPF has changed the criteria on affordable homes. Would this apply to this application, or has this come in too early for that change? I'm just curious, really, about it.
So the MPPF has put more focus on affordable homes, and it would apply to this development in as much as it hasn't been decided yet. It wasn't too early. This is the date of decision, and it's after the MPPF has come in. However, a significant part of the weighting in favour of this scheme was due to the fact that it introduces affordable homes. As the agent said, there's been a very limited amount of affordable homes, particularly in Stillington, particularly in the last decade. So, yes, but in this instance, it doesn't impact very much, if at all.
I was just curious of what the difference would be to the previous to now on how these are made more affordable.
It doesn't. As I say, it's a case by case. But I mean, there was a good amount of weight given to affordable houses in this instance. So it in this instance doesn't change an awful lot.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just have one question. Obviously, I'll have more to say when we move into the debates in relation to the scheme as the local member. Just in relation, obviously, to the speed situation, I appreciate this is a highways matter, but I just want to sort of emphasise through the officer, when you're consulting with the highways, that when they move the speed, or hopefully when the restriction gets moved outside the village, it is the whole lock, stock and block, including all the rumble strips and everything, and not just the signage. It's quite a comprehensive scheme. And the rumble strips need to also go. That is just an important point for my residents, so to speak.
Yes, no, it was noted within the representations. I have confirmed that with highways. The rumble strips are to go, and they aren't to be introduced. I think the highways line is that they are better in principle than they are necessarily in practice. So there's no plans to introduce those.
Councillor Baker.
I'm concerned, looking at that picture there, the footpath crossing would just be on the edge of the road that we can see, wouldn't it? So if I'm a driver coming, that footpath crossing could come on me quite considerably. Are there any plans? Have the highways said if they're going to put any signage or warning about the footpath crossing? I think
they haven't. And from speaking to highways, they're quite comfortable with the arrangement. In terms of where the footpath is, it's if you can see the yellow speed sign, it's beyond that. So it is right to the end. I think if could we go back to, I think, slide 6. So that image is taken from, I'd say, looking at that around 100 meters away, and there is a reasonable visibility display from the edge of the footpath. So the thinking or the feeling at the moment is that there'll be adequate space and visibility for drivers to take pedestrians into account. However, if this isn't the case, then I'm sure it'll be flagged by highways during the process.
The questions, I'll move it into debate and go straight to Councillor Taylor as the local member, and then Councillor Napton after.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Obviously, we debated this application at some length at the previous planning meeting. I've always been supportive of this development. In principle, it is a good scheme. It's it fits in with the existing development in the village, and it's very well thought out. It's been designed in a good way. It serves the housing need that we need in the village. So very, very supportive. Obviously, we had a few concerns at the last meeting, which I'm pleased to say have been addressed today by the applicant. Obviously, the main objectors have been in contact with me. They've seen the amendments, and they are pleased to see the amendments, particularly in relation to the overview from the windows, which have now been removed. I think there's a massive gain for the village in this. The speed situation will be improved. We're going to get I hope we get the footpaths. I will be jumping up and down if we don't get the footpaths, because that's a big consideration for the village. So we've arrived at what I think now is an excellent scheme. It will tick all the boxes that we need in the village. So I am more than happy to propose that we approve this scheme, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Napton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'd echo what Councillor Taylor says. When we spoke at length about this last time, and we raised several issues. The speeding signs, again, moving them back gives a benefit not only to this development in principle, but to the ship-ons and the wider village. The footpath, again, that's a public gain, because not only does it serve the proposed development, but it also gives foot access from the ship-ons, which at the moment they don't have, and they have to walk along the verge in the 60 mile an hour zone for partially. So now they'll have a reasonably safe route through this new development, and well back from the proposed speed limit. The removal of the rumble strips is very welcome. That's a topic that's often discussed in the village, and not widely supported. And also those gable end windows removed as well for the current neighbour. So the scheme's well thought out, attractive. The developer has probably more than I thought they would considered what we said at this committee last time, and gone and absolutely delivered the points that we made. So I would second Councillor Taylor's proposal.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Burr.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. It was debated. Thank you. This application was discussed at length at our previous committee meeting, and although we were in general favour of this, there were some items that needed to be addressed, and quite rightly it was brought to the local members and other councillors to input their views, and through time and just a little bit of patience, we've got a win-win situation for everybody. We've got a win-win situation for the village, and all the objections that we raised have now been signed off. So the point I'm trying to make is that it is really good that councillors do get involved. We do have local knowledge. We can make planning applications much more suitable. We all know and need that we need more homes. We need more homes. But as I say, if everybody can win out of this situation, that is what we're here to achieve. So I'm fully in support of this application. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yeah. Thank you, Connor, for your presentation. It was really good. Thank you to members, because we attended the site visits, and one of the purposes of those site visits is to look at what we're looking at, to see what we're being presented with, and to look for some of the things that we or the officers might not have paid as much attention to, perhaps as the local member. And it's good to see that all of the issues that were raised by the local members on that site visit have been addressed, have made the scheme much more acceptable to the village as a whole. So thank you for that, and thank you for all the work that you've done, Connor. So it has been moved and seconded for approval. If nobody else wishes to speak, can we go to the vote, please? Yeah. So I'll, for those four, please. That's 7-4. It's a unanimous vote, so that is approved, subject to all the bits and pieces you've got to do. Thank you very much. Thank you, Connor. Sorry for that. We just need to just tidy up. Right. So the next item on the agenda is item number 5, which is application number ZB23/02537/MRC. This is an application for the modification of condition 22 of approval application 16/02240 full relating to Bagby Airfield, and I'm going to let Craig pick this up and give his presentation. I don't think we've any speakers or anything on this, so it's not on to speak. Just a minute, Mr. Scott, because you're not down to speak. Sorry. Sorry, Craig, do carry on. And unfortunately, the Constitution doesn't allow for late speakers, so unfortunately there is no opportunities for anyone to speak on this application. Craig, do you want to carry on? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to the late items, in the report, there was no mention, obviously, on the previous approval that was granted in 2019, the 16 reference referred to earlier. That was also subject to a Section 106 agreement, but a deed of variation is not required as part of the application because there was a clause inserted within the 106, which basically stated that any future Section 73 applications will a deed of approval is not required, so that still remains in full force. The purpose of that 106 basically resulted in having a Bagby Joint Consultative Committee meeting and also limited things of movements of helicopters in and out of the airfield and to prevent aerobatics and things along those lines within that 106 agreement. So the purpose of this application today is to seek to vary condition 22 of planning reference 16/02240/FUL. The planning permission referred to is a consent granted by the council for various developments on the airfield, which have been implemented. However, the key elements of this permission was to retain control of the airfield. Through various conditions were imposed to control aircraft movements, operating hours, types of aircraft allowed to land and take off, and noise limits of particular aircraft. Condition 22 of the permission was imposed to control the type of fixed wing aircraft allowed to operate out of Bagby Airfield. With every aircraft registered in the UK, they are given a number plate, just like our vehicles, but they all begin with the letter G. Other letters are used around the world to denote where this aircraft is registered from. So on the Civil Aviation Authority's website, if you know the registration number of the aircraft, you can type this into the website and it will bring up all the noise limitations of that particular aircraft. Within the previous approval, the council took various advice from experts on what the limitations of Bagby Airfield should be in terms of noise, and subsequently this condition 22 was imposed in order to protect neighbouring residential amenity. As part of this condition, a further limit was applied to state that any aircraft that was not registered in the UK, i.e. without a G registration number, they could land or take off from the airfield as long as it did not exceed 2,730 kilograms in maximum takeoff weight. There was a period of time where an aircraft known as a Kodiak with a Canada registration was flying out of the airfield but exceed the maximum takeoff weight as it weighed 3,291 kilograms and even so still breached the noise conditions imposed by the council, specifically Chapter 10 aircraft, which I'll go into what that means later. And subsequently was not allowed to use the airfield. This aircraft is now no longer used in the airfield as has been sold to a user in Germany. However, the airfield considered that this type of aircraft is becoming a common aircraft produced outside the UK, and therefore with this alteration to condition will allow this particular type of aircraft to land and take off from the airfield. The Kodiak aircraft, that is the purpose of one of the purposes of this application, can house up to a maximum of 8 passengers. And some aircraft that is allowed to land and take off from the airfield can house up to 12 aircraft, such as a PC-12. And therefore, this variation of condition does not alter or allow any larger aircraft to land and take off from the airfield than previously allowed. It is purely to allow a different manufactured aircraft to land and take off from the airfield. As you can see from the report, it is very technical in the language used and different parts that they are seeking to alter. So in summary, there are 3 sections they seek to vary. Part 1 of the condition seeks to increase Chapter 6 limit aircraft. So this is any aircraft that is certified before the 17th of November 1988 to 79.7 decibels compared to the approved limit of 79.6 decibels. So an increase of 0.1 decibels. Part 2 of the condition seeks increase in Chapter 10 aircraft to 85.7 decibels. So any aircraft certified between the 17th of November 1988 and the 4th of November 1999, compared to an approved limit of 82.7 decibels. So that is an increase of 3 decibels. Part 3 of the condition is to increase Chapter 10 aircraft to 84.6 decibels. So any aircraft certified after the 4th of November 1999 compared to an approved limit of 82.7 decibels. So that is an increase of 1.9 decibels. Following advice from the council's consultants, York Aviation, who appointed Birkdike Allen Partners, who were noise consultants who the council used in the 2019 approval. However, from the advice of the Civil Aviation Fund, they have defined that changes of less than 3 decibels would not result in any impact on the local community in terms of noise, and subsequently would not impact on the amenity of the area. This was also confirmed by the council's environmental health officers, who agreed with the recommendations made by the noise consultants. Therefore, the application before you today is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Craig. We can't have speakers. Do we have any questions, please, for the officers? No. Then I'm going to move to Councillor Baker. Oh, sorry, Councillor Burr. Sorry. Councillor Baker's the local member, so I'll go to the Councillor Baker first. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As you can imagine, we don't often get applications for airfields, so there is a lot of technical jargon there. However, I just want to say on behalf of the residents of the parish council of Bagby and an adjacent parish council who are concerned, that they know that this application, there are no planning objections to planning rules it's against, but they are concerned that there must be a more rigorous monitoring of the site and that all conditions are adhered to and immediate action is taken if they are broken. In particular, they are concerned about the aircraft monitoring system, which has had frequent breakdowns in it. And I feel that relations need to be re-established between the residents, the applicant and the authority, and good monitoring will help to achieve this and make this acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Burr.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. York Aviation Centre know exactly what they are talking about, and as our officers have pointed out, the minor decibels won't have any impact whatsoever. So I wholeheartedly would like to support this and agree with our officers, and I would like to move that. I think that what Councillor Baker was talking about, I totally agree with you, but I think it's a slightly separate matter, because obviously that is something that needs to be upheld once everything is in place. So dealing with the application in front of us, I think the conditions are probably draconian and I don't think we need them. So I'd like to support it, I'd like to move it, and just hope that obviously the committee support that.
Councillor Napton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. It is very technical, and obviously the experts in this field, the Civil Aviation Authority, have made no objections, and our environmental health officers have looked into this and the limits. I appreciate the concerns of the parish councils. I mean, one is they're concerned that it will allow larger aircraft. I think that's been addressed by our officers, in that aircraft that can carry 12 people can currently use the airfield, and the aircraft that would come under this new remit have 8. So I think it's more a technicality than anything else. So I would like to second Councillor Burr's proposal to allow this application.
Thank you very much. Craig, on the site visit, forgive me members, I'm just going to move this slightly out of debate and just give the officer a chance to respond. But we did discuss the monitoring of aircraft into and out of the site, and we were fairly sure that we could control that and we can watch for potential breaches in that. Can you just clarify for members what the situation is and what we do, so that everybody is clear that it is being monitored properly? Thanks, Craig.
Yes, so in terms of the monitoring system, obviously when permission was granted in 2019, there was a delay in getting it implemented, and it has taken a long time to get implemented, which did result in the council serving a formal enforcement notice to get it sorted. It is now in place. I'm looking at it right now. Basically, it details all the movements in and out of the airfield. It details the type of aircraft, whether it's a fixed wing, whether it's a helicopter. It details whether it's a resident aircraft or a non-resident aircraft. And it's publicly viewable on a website for any member of the public to view. As a particular example, there was a couple of weeks ago where a helicopter landed at the airfield, which breached the noise conditions limited by the council, and it was showing on their monitoring system. So therefore, we were able to action on that fairly quickly and speak to the owner about why that happened and to make sure it doesn't happen again, which could result in us serving further enforcement notices if we feel it's expedient to do so. For example, just looking at the aircraft movements this year, it says that they've had 1,718 movements, and they are, under their permission, they're allowed 8,440 movements. So they're only operating at 20% at the moment, but you can see these movements on there. There has been times where it hasn't been working for whatever reason. This is a system that's only been up in place less than a year, so we are constantly working with the airfield to make sure that any errors that do occur, they are addressed, so then we can keep on top of it.
Thank you very much for that explanation. I think it makes it fairly transparent that we are well aware of what's going on in and around the airfield area. So thank you for that, Craig. Right, it has been moved and seconded for approval. Let's go to the vote. Can I ask those in favour, please? Those against? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Right, we'll move on to the next application for the airfield, which is application number ZB24/00064/ This is an application for the proposed development of Bagby Airfield to include the demolition and rebuild of Hangar G, extension and external alteration of Hangar F, demolition of the existing maintenance facility and erection of a new facility to form a ground floor museum hangar with first floor accommodation. This is retrospective consent for the construction of a new clubhouse following the demolition of the existing clubhouse and control tower, construction of a new control tower and new tractor shed workshop, demolition and replacement of 2 temporary hangars with a new hangar, and creation of a new aircraft electric charging point, and extension to the runway geotextile tiling, hard and soft landscaping, and creation of a new Bowser. And I'm going to hand over to Craig now to carry on with this. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, just in relation to the late items, there was some comments made on the committee site visit in relation to distances, of how long the runway is, how far away it is to the A19, etc. So that's all clarified within the late items. Also, the parish council provided a supplementary objection to the application. That objection is attached in full to the late item, and that has been addressed in relation to by comments in terms of what they've raised. Further to obviously what the previous officer said, Connor, in relation to the MPPF, I've checked the MPPF paragraphs. There's no change to the new one, so they're exactly the same. Most of the, obviously this is development of an airfield, so most of it relates to the general aviation strategy from 2015, and that hasn't been changed. That's just been referred to again within the MPPF. So in terms of the application itself, so Bagby Airfield occupies a piece of land to the south and southwest of the village of Bagby. The land lies east of the A19, is currently accessed via an access track, which is to the south of the children's play area, which you can see, which members might have seen a green meshed fence around, which was approved as part of one of a previous application. The site is around 500 metres from the southern edge of the village of Bagby, with the nearest residential property within the village of Bagby to the infrastructure of the airfield is approximately 235 metres away. So, as you can see from the site location plan, majority of the works proposed are on the north side of the runway, with only works on the south side of the runway include the removal of the temporary hangars and replacement of a new hangar, and obviously works on the south end of the runway. The majority of the approval included the erection, the approval that granted in 2019 included works to a new hangar, removal of existing buildings, creation of new hangars, and obviously various controls to limit the amount of movements in and out of the airfield. Go to next slide, please. So this is just a close-up of the proposed works. So the numbers basically, so number 1 is where the new tractor shed is to be constructed or proposed to be constructed. Hangar number 2 is Hangar F, which is alterations to the existing. Number 3 is Hangar G, which is demolition and rebuild of small extension. Number 4 is the old maintenance hangar, which is to be developed into a museum on the ground floor and short-term accommodation on the first floor. Number 5 is the clubhouse building, which is the retrospective element of the application. Point 6 is where a new fence is to be enclosed pedestrian access. Point 7 is access to the clubhouse. Point 8 is gate to allow secure access to the clubhouse. 9 is where the aircraft charging points would be. 10 is a paved area. 11 is pedestrian access to the clubhouse. 12 is delivery access. 13 is a new fence to enclose pedestrian access with a 1.8 metre green meshed fence. And 14 is a resurfaced area to allow access to Hangar F. Next slide, please. So this is the floor plan, and it was noted during the site visit there was some discussion of whether this plan was an accurate reflection on site, and I can confirm that this plan is correct. I think where we were stood at the committee site visit, it didn't give a reflection of where Hangar G was, and obviously that is proposed to be demolished and built with an extension. And it was obviously being built slightly closer to the existing maintenance hangar. Later within the presentation, I do have a further CGI of the view of the side of the airfield, which will give it a bit more better viewpoint from that. Next slide, please. So this is the museum and short-term accommodation, so the old maintenance hangar. So the current hangar was previously used for maintenance by Fox Engineering before they relocated to a larger premises on the opposite side of the runway, which was granted in 2019. It's proposed that the museum will house 2 World War II aircraft to be on display for visitors to the airfield. The proposal includes the refurbishment of the front of the site with glass panels, with the remaining to be clad. Also proposed is that short-term accommodation be constructed on the first floor, and this was also approved as part of the 2019 permission. It would comprise 3 separate units with single bedrooms. Both the museum and the short-term accommodation would only be open to users of the airfield and not to members of the public. During the course of the application, obviously we have consulted York Aviation on all proposals done as part of this development. So York Aviation considered that it's advisable that a condition on the use of the accommodation is imposed on any grant of planning permission. It is anticipated that there may be a need to control the use of the accommodation such that it's only available to airfield members and pilots, users visiting the aircraft, rather than allowing the accommodation to be potentially made available for more general use, which could have wider impacts in terms of traffic and parking. A condition to control use of the accommodation may also prevent growth above the proposed 3 units to ensure any consent could not be used in the future to set a precedent for the development of some form of hotel or altogether larger capacity facility that might bring with a range of issues in terms of car parking provision and unwanted additional general site activity. Furthermore, the proposals refer to the museum housing of 2 Pacific vintage aircraft already kept at the airfield. York Aviation advised that they do not anticipate any specific issues that may adversely affect the conditions of use. It's considered that the alterations would be in accordance with the Council's policies, specifically policy EG8 for tourist accommodation. Next slide, please. Hangar G, this proposal is to demolish and rebuild the hangar on the same footprint with a modest extension to the south of the building. The extension would increase the footprint by 30 to 39 metres squared. This was proposed in 2019, but did not include a small extension. However, the extension is considered to be modest and in practical terms would not fundamentally change the capacity of the building, but would add more flexibility in terms of movement of aircraft in and out of the aircraft. York Aviation commented on this aspect, advising that the new hangar would be constructed in largely the same footprint, with what is described as a 13.5% extension to the floor space along the front edge of the hangar to align the facade with that of adjacent hangar F. These proposals formed part of the 2019 consent applied without the extension to floor space. It is considered that the extension is modest. York Aviation estimate adds only around 2 metres in depth to the hangar, which in practical terms would not fundamentally change the capacity of the building, but would rather add more flexibility to positioning and movability of aircraft. Furthermore, there is no indication that the current use as a clubhouse hangar would change post planning permission granted. As such, it is not anticipated there would be a material adverse impacts in the context of the planning conditions, and would accept the proposals in line with the airfield, providing higher quality facilities. It would be reasonable to impose a further condition to ensure that the hangar is kept for storage only, and that has been recommended as part of the conditions. Next slide, please. The new hangars. This would be positioned to the south of the runway and would replace the 2 existing temporary hangars. It's proposed with the removal of these hangars, a singular permanent structure would be constructed, which would measure 832 metres squared in floor space. It would have a height of 4.1 metres to ridge and would be approximately 21 metres in width and depth of 17 metres. This would be of similar height to the adjacent hangar. As members will remember, there was a smaller hangar next to it, and it would be a similar height to that, not to the same height as the one next to that, which was obviously significantly larger. York Aviation reviewed this aspect of the proposal and have advised that the 2 temporary hangars were subject to an enforcement notice requiring the removal and a subsequent appeal, which allowed the retention of the hangars for a period of a further 24 months from October 22. In light of the decision made on the appeal, they would agree that the proposed larger and higher quality hangar allows the airfield to transition to cater for higher value aircraft and does not in itself mean that more aircraft would be based at the airfield. This is on the basis that the users and this hangar is focused at would have larger aircraft. Overall, it's thought that it would be reasonable that the airfield proposes that this hangar is a replacement for temporary parking shelters that are only suitable for hobbyist and leisure aircraft that are of smaller size. Again, a further planning condition can be imposed to ensure that it is for storage use only, and that is recommended within the conditions. Next slide, please. Hangar F, members may recall we stood in this hangar on the committee site visit. This is a former old pig shed hangar, and it's proposed that this hangar would be refurbished internally and externally by removing the internal obstructions and introducing new access doors. The hangar would be extended westwards by a further 7 metres, and this would create an additional 300 metres squared of footprint and would enable more modern aircraft to be stored in the hangar. York Aviation advised that the alterations to Hangar F retains the lawful use of the hangar. Although there is a 300 metre square extension is unlikely to materially change the capacity of the building, they consider that these proposals appear reasonable to allow for the provisions of higher quality facilities and should not in themselves risk an increase in activity to the extent that would cause a breach of existing planning conditions. Next slide, please. Tractor shed. This permission was previously granted for a hangar in 2019, but it was only for a 90 metre squared floor print. The proposed hangar would be significantly larger and would have a footprint of 600 metres squared. The building would have a height of 5.6 metres to the ridge and would be approximately 49 metres in width and a depth of 17 metres. This would be constructed out of similar cladded materials of the existing hangars on the site. It is noted that this is a larger with the aircraft stating it is required as a custom storage hangar to be used in connection with border force regulations for international flights. York Aviation have commented on this aspect of the development, stating that the 2019 consent proposals for 90 square metres facility located to the north of Hangar F were approved. The updated proposals are for a much larger 600 metre square facility in broadly the same location as previously proposed. However, York Aviation assumed that in light of the size, it was intended for storage of up to 2 tractor-sized vehicles with some working manoeuvring space, as well as perhaps ancillary storage space around the perimeter. The current proposals state that the larger facilities to accommodate the tractor storage function as before, along with workshop space and a temporary custom storage hangar function in connection with border force regulations for international flights. This later function is understood to be necessary for the occasional international flights that might, for example, relate to jockeys or VIPs arriving and departing from local horse racing events or similar. In terms of the functions as proposed, they appear reasonable to allow the operator adequately store machinery such as tractors, as well as maintain them with addition of the workshop proposal. There is no indication that there would be any aircraft engineering or engine testing carried out in this facility that would bring it with noise issues. However, it would be further prudent to put a condition to use this shed for tractor storage only and light maintenance of other non-aircraft machinery and equipment, and that is proposed as part of the conditions. Next slide. This is for the clubhouse and control tower. A relocation of the clubhouse and control tower from what was previously proposed is now being presented, which shows an increase to 195 metres squared. This is a retrospective element of the application. It is considered that with better facilities, this will include dining facilities and a bar within the clubhouse. York Aviation have commented on this aspect of the proposal and advised that the porter cabin, which now operates unconsented as the clubhouse is around 195 metres squared, which is twice the area of the old clubhouse building. However, the scale of the new facility is not considered unreasonable in comparison to the scale of clubhouse facilities at other similar sized airfields. The proposal notes that the new facility would allow for higher quality facility than previously, with the ability to include dining facilities and a bar. In addition, a new tower structure will be provided immediately adjacent to the new clubhouse to replicate the facility lost with the demolition of the old tower and clubhouse that is required to enable the rebuild and extension of Hangar G. As presented, York Aviation does not have any concerns about the proposals in the context of the planning conditions linked to the movement and operational constraints, building uses constraints or noise constraints. Overall, the proposal appear reasonable in terms of the airfield's wider plans to improve the condition and quality of the facilities. Next slide. So this is a visual representation of the tower and the control house. As you can see, it will be the current porter cabin at the moment is obviously your typical porter cabin structure. It will be cladded to make it blend in more with the surrounding area. And also the control tower will be of a rendered material as well to make it blend in adjacent to the existing hangars. Next slide, please. As alluded to earlier, this is the visual presentation of the tower. So as you're stood from, when looking at the southeast elevation, when stood on the far side of the runway, that is what the view that you'll see. So as you can see, Hangar G will have that extension, which will link it closely to the previous maintenance hangar, which will now be the museum and the short-term accommodation. Next slide, please. So the further works that are proposed to be done to the airfield is works to the runway. So it's proposed that the remaining 33% of the runway is to be reinforced by the addition of heavy-duty plastic tiles. The works propose the top layer to be removed, drainage and a sand substrate introduced and topped with heavy-duty plastic tiles to hold the reseeded soil. Unlike other small airfields, which often incorporate a separate tarmac runway, once the grass has matured, this would be no obvious change to the current characteristics of the runway. The applicant has stated that the primary purpose of the proposed change to the runway surfing is to enable the safety of aircraft movements permitted under current planning controls in most weather and ground conditions. The proposed alteration would not result in performance improvements and has no bearing on the type, size and mass of aircraft utilising the airfield. The applicant has advised that the current unsurfaced portion of the runway has been prone to waterlogging, compounded by surface water runoff from the surface sections of the runway. Without adequate surfacing, there is a risk that saturated ground loss structurally integrity in terms of risking a breakthrough of wheels, leading to structural failure of the undercarriage, potential damage to aircraft and loss of control. The applicant advises that consistency of surface is extremely important and the proposed surface alterations to the runway would provide pilots with a reliable and stable surface, reducing aquaplaning and in turn facilitating landings at reduced power. In contrast, the current unsurfaced section, due to the aforementioned risks, leads to pilots landing at maximum power and in turn increasing noise. York Aviation have commented on this aspect of the proposed development, advising that the proposals include for the remaining 33% of the runway length to be reinforced with geotextile matting similar to the works carried out in the past on the other sections of the runway. The primary justification of these works is to ensure aircraft safety in relation to waterlogging of the existing surface and the potential for damage to aircraft wheel gear and risk of loss of control to the aircraft. In work carried out by the previous council, planning permission that was granted for works to the north of the runway under 21/01243 FUL, which included a further concrete into the north and the geotextile matting to the north of the runway. York Aviation concluded that the proposed benefits of the matting were genuine and they were unlikely to facilitate increased movements or use by larger aircraft. As such, York Aviation find it again reasonable to assume that the provision of the additional matting itself is unlikely to result in larger, noisy aircraft or a higher number of movements such that would be a breach of the planning conditions. So as you can see, no, it's fine. Looking down to the south, this is looking down to the south, where you've got the concrete setting, and obviously beyond that is where the grass will be changed to the geotextile matting. If you just go to the next slide. We'll skip over that one, come back to that one. So this one here, as you can see, this was a photo taken in the winter, and this is where the geotextile matting would be put down. And as you can see, where aircraft movements have used it before, the wheels have got stuck into the grass, and they wish to avoid that. It's also worth noting, as part of one of the planning conditions from the previous approval, from the maintenance facility, they are allowed to do engine testing as part of the maintenance facility. And part of that maintenance is that with the engine testing, they have to go and use the south end of the runway. We have had numerous instances over the years where the aircraft can't get down there and they get stuck. So they use the north end of the runway, which is a breach of the planning controls. So this enables them to do that engine testing element. If you just go to the next slide. So again, that's just a further view looking down to the bottom. So you've got the hedgerow, and then you've got a further hedgerow beyond that, and then that's where the A19 is, just to give a context. So it's proposed that the matting will go all the way down to that first hedgerow, and then obviously beyond that is the A19. Next slide. If we just go back a couple of slides. That one, thank you. So this is where the proposed electrical charging points are to be installed. Again, York Aviation have commented on this proposal, advising do not have any concerns with the provision of a charging point, as this should lead to the introduction of the first generation of light electric powered aircraft at the airfield. These new types of aircraft, such as pitch-straw wheels, are quieter and cleaner than piston engine or turboprop aircraft, and so come with significant benefits. It is worth noting that at present this range of available aircraft in this category is limited, and as they are both new types and technologically advanced, are expensive in comparison to many of the traditional lighter aircraft movements. That aside, they generally will be quieter, so they, even with electrical charging points, they will still comply with the noise conditions because we have got limits in terms of the noise controlled on that aspect. There is also proposed as part of the application a new Bowser. This would be mobile and has no fixed position on the site. There is already one in sight, a fixed one, which was granted in 2019, and that has a capacity of 14,000 litres. The new Bowser features 8 pods, each capable of housing around 5,000 litres of Jet A1 fuel. The tank is designed with double skin structure, ensuring compliance with road safety regulations. The applicant hopes that this additional capacity would meet monthly demand even in the high season without resorting to weekly deliveries that's happened in the past. It's worth noting that on the 6th of May 2015, the council did issue an enforcement notice alleging a breach of planning control in regard to a mobile fuel facility. The appeal was allowed by the inspector as it was considered that the fuel facility was not considered to be a building as defined by section 336 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and therefore was not considered to be development. Therefore, as the proposed fuel barrels is proposed to be movable and not of a large size and has a degree of permanence and has no degree of permanence to the ground, it technically does not require planning permission. However, as it being included with the proposed description, is considered that it's located within the confines of the airfield and within a countryside location is an acceptable form of development, which is in accordance with the council's policies. If we go to the next slide, please. Next one. So this is where the 2 temporary hangars are currently, which are currently unlawful, basically from the appeal granted by the inspector, which granted them 2 years permission. So they seek to remove those 2 temporary hangars and to replace it with the new hangar as detailed earlier. Next slide. This is a view of the existing hangars and the clubhouse as it currently is, standing from where the on the other side of the runway. As you can see from the mud at the bottom, that's where the proposed changes would be, and obviously that's where the existing structures they wish to change. Next slide. This is the hangar, so the one with the corrugated iron roof, that is the one that they're seeking to demolish, and also the green porter cabin site building is also to be demolished. As members will remember from site visit, I believe that a part of that green clubhouse building is starting to fall down, as they've had to replace some cladding to it as well. Next slide. This is the existing hangar that's to be renovated and extended. So this is the former old pig shed building, which is to be renovated and extended, as what was alluded to earlier. Next slide. That location where there's sort of like a mound and some rubbish materials, that is where the proposed location of the new tractor shed is to be positioned. Next slide. This is another view from the old pig shed building, which is to be renovated and extended. Next slide. This is the view of the clubhouse building, which obviously is the bit that is retrospective, which they seek to obviously retain and clad it as per what the CGI suggested, with some further obviously hard landscaping in and around there. Next slide. That is to the rear of the maintenance hangar, which is to be the new museum. Obviously, there's not much change on that rear elevation apart from a stair access to the back. Next slide. That's just a view of the clubhouse building to the side, which obviously that will all be landscaped accordingly. Next slide. This is the front view of the clubhouse building with proposed decking area. So obviously they've got the concrete there, but that will be all with a low-lying fence and a decking area to look out onto the runway. Next slide. And this is a proposed, obviously that's where the view is of where the maintenance building, where the museum will be, which will have a glass frontage and will have a link through, and where that gap is between the maintenance and the clubhouse, that's where the control tower will be positioned. So in conclusion, the application seeks planning permission for redevelopment of several buildings within the airfield. As the site is within a countryside location and is a business in a rural area, it is considered that the proposal to redevelop certain buildings is in accordance with the council's local plan policies, as the majority of the rebuilds are on the same footprint as existing buildings or involve appropriate increases in floor spaces of existing buildings. The proposal is considered acceptable in accordance with local plan policies in respect of all other material considerations as set out in the above assessment, subject to the imposition of the regular planning conditions. It is important to acknowledge that the proposed element is not the operation and expansion of the airfield and would not result in the operations at the airfield surpassing that to which are limited under condition 13 of planning reference 16224, which is the number of aircraft movements allowed within a calendar year. Rather, the expansion of the business would be in the form of increasing the quality of existing on-site facilities and providing sufficient storage space to support the goals outlined in the applicant's business plan. The proposed development would enable Bagby Airfield to move away from small hobbyist aircraft and microlights to more modern aircraft, alongside enhancing security of the airfield and the safety of its operators. The proposed works would enable the airfield to comply with UK Border Force regulations and the attendant from HMRC of import and export tax rules, enabling arrival and departure from and to EU and non-UK destinations. The proposals would involve the current hangar space on the site and also provide upgraded clubhouse facilities to accommodate visitors to the site. Furthermore, the application also proposes the introduction of a museum facilities to the airfield to view vintage aircraft on display at the airfield. It's considered that these changes are in line with the Council's local plan policies and the overarching principles of the NPFF, and the application is recommended for approval. and brief. Thank you.
Sorry, members, there's an awful lot to consider, so I'll just let Craig draw breath and have a drink and open it up for questions from the members. Stunned. There are no questions. Oh, you've got one. No, Councillor Mason, you have the floor.
So you mentioned, I've just been scanning through again. I'm trying to find out, obviously the NPPF is now trying to help encourage us to tackle climate change with renewable energy provision as much as we can. Is there any solar on the roofs of these new hangars, for instance, to put energy into the charging, for instance? Is that sort of, I'm trying to find that aspect of the application.
There isn't any proposed solar panels on any of the hangars at all. There is, when the permission was granted in 2019, again, they've got all the existing hangars renovated. Have got no solar panels on them at all. I would have to take advice if you were seeking to get solar panels. I'd have to take advice on whether the glare of the solar panels would maybe impact aircraft coming in. I'm not sure. That would be an aviation expert. I'm not that expert, but that could be an argument potentially. Yeah, possibly. But no, as part of the application, there's no proposed solar panels on.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, you mentioned this is illegal, that's illegal, and I'm thinking it's all illegal, this place. I just wondered how long has the clubhouse been illegal? Because it looks fairly well established building, and I do know a bit about buildings. Thank you.
The clubhouse building has been there for a while. It's been there since 2017-18, but at the time we did take enforcement action against the clubhouse building because it wasn't actually being used and it was still technically mobile. It is upon recently, prior to this application, they made it permanent by attaching it to the ground development. So that was put in probably the end of 2023 was when it was made permanent, and that's why we'd contacted the owner about making an application for it, which he subsequently put the application in but included it as part of this fuller application.
No other questions? No. I'll move it into debate then, please. Councillor Baker, you're the local member, so I'll come to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also want to point out this is an application that's it's different to other applications that we've had. At the start, if you look at the map, the airfield is virtually in between two parishes. So, you know, there is that consideration to take into account. Whilst it is in the parish of Bagby, the neighbouring parish is sort of equidistant the other side, to the south east of it. I think this is tidying up in the physical and in the planning sense the airfield, and I welcome it. And as I said on the previous application, I welcome the fact that hopefully this will move the relationship that has been not very good forward. I know at the site visit we had a representative from the parish council, and the manager did reach out to the parish council by way of offering the clubhouse as a venue. So I think the parish now can move forward, and I do welcome the tidying up of the site.
Councillor Burr.
Thank you. I'm not sure if Councillor Baker was moving that, but if she wasn't moving it, I would like to support it, and I would like to move this application. I don't want to take, you know, it's your parish, but I didn't get that you were moving it. Okay, so I would like to move it. I would like to support our officers. I think that that was for someone who is an aviation buff. I thought it was fascinating. I thought it was really great, and I think York Aviation. I have every confidence that you know, their information that they give us is absolutely sound. So to me, what it seems is that it's a tidy up, but yet it's an improvement, it's an investment, it's everything that we want. And as we were told at the recent application, that it's only running at its 20% of its capacity. So I would like to hope that this would actually improve everything and make it a centre of excellence. I think that the museum part of the application is absolutely magnificent. I think that that's something that quite a lot of people are interested in, and people like to go to a destination and they like to go and see these aviation centres. So a really thorough and good report. Again, as I said at the previous, that the relations really, it's good to hear about the relations, but they are not part of this application which is in front of us. So that's pleasing, but we've got to deal with the application. So taking it all into account, I do want to support it. To me, it would seem sensible that you put one application in, you put it all on the table, and you get it all out there so we understand totally what is going on. And all in all, I think it was good that it was all brought in one. Although it was a lot for us probably to take in, we are where we are. I've moved it, and I hope I get a seconder. Thank you.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I support my colleague Councillor Baker's comments about this is a tidying up exercise, and I know from the visit on Monday, and I've been involved in previous site visits over a number of years there, it is very tired. We saw there was some wind damage to some of the buildings that are going to be improved, so it is a tidying up exercise. There will be much better facilities, more modern facilities. The aircraft world is changing, more modern electric planes, which I'm still getting my head around a little bit. But the world is changing, and they need the more modern facilities to accommodate them. So yes, I'm very supportive of it. I think it will be a lot more aesthetically pleasing. As you've seen, some of the buildings, some of the hangars, they've not stood the test of time well. Just one minor observation. I'd like to just, I don't like to. I appreciate it's only a real small part of this application, but I don't like to see retrospective applications. I do take a dim view of that, and it is only a very small part of this application. So yeah, having said all that, I'm happy to support Councillor Burr's proposal, and I will second that the application is approved, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Napton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I would echo what my fellow members have said. It is a tidying up exercise. The site visit on Monday, we saw that there had been storm damage to the temporary structures, and I think that upgrading some of those buildings would be welcome. I don't have any concerns about this causing an excess of movements. Running at 20%, there's a huge headway there for any additional movements that are caused. I welcome the conditions regarding who can use the facilities. I think that I raised that at the site visit, and I think that those have been addressed by condition. So I would support this application, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Napton. Anybody else? No. Just from the chair, can I just say thank you for the site visit on Monday. It was really useful, and actually, as members have said, it's really useful to get everything out on the table and to be able to have a complete overview of what's going on. It was very clear. There were some very tired buildings that were possibly never intended for the use for aircraft. I'm thinking about the pig building in particular. And I think actually this improves the situation. And whilst I accept there is a draw for the older aircraft, pre-war aircraft or wartime aircraft, I need to be clear, this is for members only. It's not open for the general public, and we wouldn't want it to be open to the general public for that kind of thing, because it would increase traffic considerably. So yeah, I'm very happy to support the application. So it has been moved and seconded for approval, members. If no one else wishes to make any comment, then we'll go to the vote. Can we have a show of hands, those for the development, please? Anyone against? Any abstentions? Councillor. Okay, that's carried. Thank you very much. We'll do a 5-minute comfort break for members. Sorry. Right, everybody, can we resume? We've had a 5-minute comfort break and we need to get this last item on the agenda dealt with before we close for the day and before Christmas. Thanks, everybody. Just as in the interest of transparency, can I just declare from the chair, and it'd be up to other members to declare, I have received a number of emails and letters in relation to this item for lobbying purposes. So I just declare that now, and if any other members want to indicate the same. Yeah, okay, I think that's fair enough that we've done that. So I will now hand over to Peter Jones, who is going to present this item.
Thank you.
And thank you very much. Oh, actually, just wait, because I've got to read out the...
I can do that if you would.
You can do that. Thank you.
So we have an application for the construction of an office building with associated workshop and vehicle storage space, along with external site compound, covered cycle storage building, associated accesses, car parking and landscaping on land south of Rickle Drive in Helmsley. Before I start to go through the presentation, one or two little bits of update. So there's a small element set out in the update papers with regard to the MPPF, and clearly we've heard a little bit already this morning about changes to the MPPF. Now there are a number of references in the report with regard to the MPPF. However, the only change is with regard to paragraph numbers. And so as we go through the report, paragraph 10.9, the reference does not change. Paragraph 10.16, we have a new paragraph number to changes from 165 to paragraph 170. And then a series of paragraph changes in the heritage section. So paragraph 205 changes to 212, 206 to 213, 208 to 215, 209 to 216. There's no changes to the specific wording in those paragraphs. And then moving to report, paragraph 10.52, framework paragraph 114 stays the same, as do the other references with regard to highways. And that is all. There's no change within the text of the MPPF that would otherwise change the consideration of the application. I have a verbal update. So we have a letter from Kevin Hollingrake with regard to a constituent letter really requesting that the matter be deferred, primarily in this case because of the relationship to timing and Christmas and the availability of people to have either prepared for today or to otherwise attend today. So that was a request from Kevin Hollingrake on that basis. There is another update in the officer update sheet which refers to conditions, but if I may, I'll come back to that through the course of the presentation in order to sort of explain that in relation to the slides. Okay, so if we could go, we've got, I think, slide, sorry, I'm still messing about with my new glasses, which I don't quite get in the right range for certain elements. So location plan here on the screen showing the land edge red right on the edge of the settlement. We have new housing development immediately to the northeast of the site. So that was granted consent a few years ago and has recently been completed. Clearly the access then is via Rickle Drive through to the A170. It is a residential area that it otherwise services. The site itself is allocated in the local plan. Now, bearing in mind, we've got a slightly odd situation here, or an unusual situation, in as much as we have two relevant local plans. So the strategic policies are set out in the Rydale local plan, and the specific allocation policies are set out then in the Helmsley plan. So that looks specifically at locations in the immediate vicinity here, which I'll explain momentarily, but also other sites around Helmsley which were allocated for development. If you go to the next slide, please. So just a little bit of context. So that image, aerial image there, shows the whole of Helmsley. Clearly, the existing National Park HQ sits within the centre of the town on Bongate, within the old vicarage site. Part of that is then part of their current operations are accessed off Sawmill Lane. So you can see on that image the sort of industrial area to the southwest and west of the red box there. That's an industrial area occupied by a number of different operations, but the National Park have two small sites accessed from Sawmill Lane, which incorporate the Ranger Depot and their services at the moment. So next image, bit more of a zoom in, so that gives a bit more clarity in terms of the location of the site in relation to both the housing that's been built, the existing housing to the north, and then the employment land that sits to the west. Noting at this point, if you take a line of the drive or the access that comes down through past the site to the east, effectively that splits the area into two halves. So the area to the east is allocated for housing and effectively is a continuation of the new housing that's been built recently. And then the area to the west of that line is allocated in the local plan of the Helmsley plan for employment purposes. So the proposal is in compliance with the Helmsley plan in those terms, in terms of the generality of that use. So next image, we're then onto the site plans and the details of the application itself. So this plan shows the basic layout of the site. Clearly we have the two industrial buildings immediately to the west. The National Park also own the land then further west to that, where the old print works were. There are no proposals in the current application for anything on that part of the site. So anything that they propose to do would be subject to a future application if and when that is then proposed. The area to the north of the site, on the other side of the road, noting the road itself is a private road. The adoption only includes Rickle Drive itself and the turning head at the southern end of Rickle Drive. The access then to the north is a private access over which the National Park would have rights to pass and repass. The site then as I say, to the north of that is currently rough ground effectively. It's partly covered with trees and sort of dogwood scrub. The proposal there is to effectively carry out planting under their permitted development rights, so that would allow for planting and landscaping of that area, which would then be otherwise accessible, including a permissive footpath through that part of the site and linking up with an existing footpath route in the northwestern corner of that parcel of land. I'll come back to that public right of way issue in a moment. Next image, please. So zoom in now into the proposal itself, and I'll talk through the site effectively from the east to the west. So we have the visitor parking effectively sitting along that western fringe, along with a landscape buffer, and I'll come back to the landscape buffer momentarily. So visitor parking in that zone, that includes electric vehicle charging point. It then provides for access into the building, so the public frontage of the building would effectively be on that eastern elevation. Public access into the building. We then have within the building, and I'll show you momentarily floor plans, but effectively communal spaces, conference spaces, and office spaces within that part of the building. Then the eastern edge of the building, the western edge of the building, within, if you will, the courtyard area, so furthest away from the residences sitting to the east, is the functional spaces for the ranger service and volunteer service and such like in that area, effectively then opening into this external compound. So it's a fenced compound providing storage and parking for the ranger service and for those other functions of the national park. Then to the north of that, you'll see this area of staff parking, including enclosed storage for cycles and such like. So effectively you have 3 access points along that private road, one for the visitor parking, one for the staff parking, and then one for the operation of the ranger service. There's been quite a lot of discussion, and I'll go through this through the photographs as well, but quite a lot of discussion from third parties around the nature of traffic and the amount of traffic that would then use Rickle Drive. From my perspective, the majority of traffic using this site will be cars. However, the national park clearly use 4-wheel drives and trailers and such like, and one would expect deliveries of things like stiles and gates and such like to the site as well. So you would expect a change to the types of vehicles that would be operating in this vicinity as a direct result of this proposal. But from my perspective, given the quality of the road, given the layout of the road, and clearly Highway's perspective on those matters, we don't consider that that results in an impact that would result in a highway safety issue, which would result in a recommendation for refusal. Bearing in mind, the National Planning Policy Framework sets out that one would only seek to refuse an application on highway safety grounds if the impact of the development was severe. So it's a relatively high bar in those terms, in terms of safety. I'll come back to that a little bit in the photographs. If we could go to the next image, please. So I mentioned the buffer zone to the eastern flank of the site. The allocation for development to this site includes a requirement to buffer from the existing housing development. Now, the purpose of that is clearly partly visual, partly noise, and partly the general character of the site. So the proposals in front of you today do include, and I reference the update sheet at this point too, because I had penned a revision to the conditions, which perhaps in part is obviated by this plan. So this would form part of the recommendation for approval. This plan would form part of the recommendation for approval. And noting that it includes a series of heavy standard tree planting in this zone. It then includes areas of fairly low planting. Now, clearly the question here is, or the need here is to create a planting scheme which allows the development to be assimilated into the area, protect amenity from day one. Now, from my perspective, I'm actually happy that reference to this drawing would be sufficient, but it may be that members consider that additional bolster planting in order to create something of a slightly higher level in terms of bushes and shrubs and such like is necessary in order to make the proposals work. I have also set out in the recommendation a requirement for a screen fence to be built along that boundary prior to commencement of development in order to protect local residents' amenity during the course of the development of the site. So that would effectively be a fence 2 meters in height, close boarded, in order to provide that protection, as I say, just during the course of the development itself. That would then be removed and be otherwise, if you will, replaced by the planting scheme that would be set out in the scheme. The planting scheme itself, the condition requires that scheme to be implemented in the first planting season following occupation. So again, that relationship would develop over time, but clearly we're looking to get that planting in as early as possible and, if you will, as large as possible in order to create that screen from day one. So next image, please. Series of images now looking really at the design and the relationship of the development to its immediate environs. Now, clearly we have the existing, excuse me one moment. Clearly we have the existing industrial buildings immediately to the west of the site. The proposal really in terms of its design bears no relationship to that at all. Clearly the design here is to achieve a high quality space which provides office accommodation and other facilities associated with the operation of a National Park HQ. The building has been designed in order to pick up on some of the wider themes in terms of materials, but clearly it's a large envelope in order to create a modern, effective office space. Now you can see on this image the relationship in terms of height actually is not significantly different from the housing in the near vicinity. It is higher, but we're not talking about anything which towers over the accommodation in the near vicinity. Clearly, in terms of its overall massing, it's a much bigger building than a dwelling. I'm not trying to escape from that. As I say, the materials that are being proposed then are trying to pick up on some of those themes. Just running through the elevations there. So the top elevation is what you would see from the road access looking south. And then the second elevation, the coloured elevation, is effectively what you would see looking from the existing housing on Rickle Drive, looking west across the site. The third elevation then is looking in the other direction, looking back from the edge of the site toward Rickle Drive. And the last elevation then looking from the south, from the allocated land for employment to the south, looking north into the site. Next image, please. So this is, I particularly pulled out this image just to go through some of the details, and particularly because this is effectively the public frontage of the proposal and is what you would be looking at, notwithstanding the intervening car park and planting between Rickle Drive and the building itself. So incorporating three primary materials, so trying to pick up on some of the local stone, so looking to reflect the stone out of which the houses in the vicinity has been built, incorporating wooden cladding to the upper elements and some of the detail elements, and then a metal roofing material across the main roofs. Noting, and we've talked a little earlier about solar panels and such like, the proposals incorporate a number of environmental elements in terms of renewable energy, so a significant number of solar panels. We have, and I'll come onto this in more detail in a moment, but rainwater harvesting and such like within the proposals, and meeting those requirements in terms of the BREEAM energy assessments. So I think move on to the next image, which is we have a couple of sort of pictorial impressions of the building. Again, this is here to give you a feel for the character of the proposals. So incorporating stone wall along that frontage, just a sort of feature wall effectively, the buffer landscaping to the left of that image, and then looking along the private access road, picking up at the end of the road there the old railway signal box. Noting at that point the report picks up on the signal box and the station, and of course the interpretation of the run of the railway for that matter, and seeing those as non-designated heritage matters which need to be assessed in the planning balance. Now, clearly, just touching on that, we talk often about the relationship to heritage matters and the importance of giving any harm to designated heritage matters significant weight in the planning balance, whereas non-designated heritage matters such as this would be given just simply weight in the planning balance with other matters. Bearing in mind, we don't find any harmful impact in terms of designated heritage matters. So again, slightly different angle. Clearly, this is an impossible view, but gives you a feel for the massing of the building and its relationship to its site, the fenced area to the rear where the compound is, and the storage associated with the ranger service. I think next image. This is simply the floor plans. I'll not dwell here too long, but effectively, as I described previously, public entrance on the ground floor, conference facilities, other facilities associated with the operations of the site, offices to the first floor, and then the grey areas in the ground floor plan there are effectively the storage and operations associated with the ranger service. Next image. Okay, so flooding and drainage issues. We're in flood zone 1, so there are no significant issues. We don't have any surface water flooding issues or pluvial flooding issues on this site. So we're really looking at site management questions and discharge points and such like associated with the development. So the hashed area of the main car park there is shown as a permeable surface. And then we have a series of, or a network of surface water drainage incorporating a 18,000 litre tank for rainwater harvesting. So that's rainwater that they could then reuse within the site. And then attenuation otherwise of surface water on site before discharge to infiltration. So I raise in the report a question with regard to the infiltration points. The British Standard for Infiltrations looks at 3 infiltration tests in the vicinity of each of those test points. To date, only 1 has been carried out in each of the test points and found to be effective. Because we're in flood zone 1 and I don't have issues in terms of surface water flooding, and clearly I'll raise the issue that third parties have raised concern around surface water flooding to the south of this site, that there has been standing water on the field. We're not aware of any issues with the drainage of this particular site. So from my point of view, given where we are in the proposals, I'm satisfied that the risk here is very low in terms of drainage, and the risk of the infiltration points not being effective is equally low. Clearly, there is a risk there to the National Park Authority, to the applicant, if for any reason those infiltration tests, which we would require by condition to be carried out pre-commencement, if they would fail. So that would be a risk on the applicant. Otherwise, we're satisfied that the drainage strategy that's proposed is acceptable and manages that water in an appropriate way. In the case of exceedance, water effectively leaves the site to the north via the roadway, and as in most cases where we're looking at new developments, the road is then used to channel water in case of exceedance. Next image, please. Series of photographs. So this is looking southeast across the site, standing on the private road. So effectively somewhere near the access into the back of the buildings. Clearly it's relatively flat. It falls gently away to the south toward the river. You're just to say picking up the housing there on the left-hand side of that image. Next image, please. And then this is looking northeast across the site to the existing housing. And again, you're picking up the most recent housing on the right-hand image, right-hand side of that image, sorry, and then the existing housing to the north. And next image, looking back up along Rickle Drive. Again, the site access immediately to the left of that image. Next image, please. This is the old signal box and the former print works at the immediate western fringe of the site. Next image, and the buildings used for storage for historic England or English heritage, I forget which suddenly, but used for storage. The buildings here, they're occupied and are used. They don't generate an awful lot of traffic as far as I can see. It tends to be, half a dozen cars, and not an awful lot else appears to use that on a day-to-day basis. Next image shows a bit further away from the standing on Rickle Drive, looking west across the site or southwest across the site. I mentioned then the permissive footway that the National Park's proposing across the area of land to the north of the site. So this creates a link to an existing footpath. It is not a public right of way. So there is a risk here, and I say in the report that I give it only limited weight for the reason that notionally, whilst it appears to have been there for, let's say, a good number of years, we've got something of the order of 30 years or more, it is not a public right of way and therefore could be contested. So this is a link that goes through from that footpath down a series of steps. There's a little transformer switchgear on the left-hand side at the bottom of the steps. And then, if you will, looking across that image in the top right corner would be then the link to the proposed permissive footpath to be implemented by the National Park. Next image. So the next image then shows the link effectively. It's a pretty good path from the point of view of its structure. It's clearly used regularly by dog walkers. There's a dog walkers disposal bin on the right hand side just out of shot. So but I have to caution that it is not a public right of way and therefore should be only given limited weight. Next image, please. So this I think is the last. Oh yeah, well, last but one. This image then shows there's an 80-90 degree corner on Rickle Drive, about halfway down Rickle Drive. So the road runs fairly straight from the A170 to this point, takes a turn to the left. I wanted to raise this in amongst really the representations made, raising concern about the use of the highway, the changes to amenity and the impact that therefore may have on residents in the immediate vicinity. So residents at the moment are saying it's very quiet. We have limited numbers of vehicles that go all of the way down Rickle Drive. Clearly there's more housing to the north of this point, which is accessed from the top part of Rickle Drive. But people are saying that it's a quiet residential street. It's occupied by people, kids are playing in the vicinity, and that the increase in use of the proposal of the road, will have a harmful impact in terms of road safety, in terms of amenity because of additional noise and pollution and such like, and that will have a detrimental impact simply through the additional use and the difference in the use of the highway as a result of the proposals. From my perspective and from the Highway Authority's position, as I said previously, we don't have an issue in terms of meeting that severe impact in the MPPF in terms of road safety. Clearly, there will be a change to the use of the road. The question then, from my perspective, is whether or not that has a harmful impact on the amenity of residents in the vicinity. In my view, it will have a change. There will be a change in terms of impacts on those properties, but that in terms of your policies, it doesn't result in a loss of amenity that would be sufficient to recommend for a refusal. So if you just move to the last image, please. Now, I've included this. One of the other matters that have been raised in representations is around the requirement in the Helmsley plan to have coordination between sites. So the Helmsley plan effectively sets out, because we've got a significant area, partly for employment purposes, partly for housing purposes, the Helmsley plan sets out there's a requirement for coordination between the development of different sites. Now it looks at that in a couple of different terms. Primarily, in my view, it looks at the question of access, both vehicular and pedestrian, but it also then looks at wider issues around character of settlement, the landscaping of this of the settlement and its relationship to its wider environs. So the national parks application is the area. This drawing is taken from a current application that's pending for the development of the land to the south. So this includes the orange area, which would be for housing, and the yellow area, which would be for employment purposes. I'm not going to go through the details of that application as it's still pending and will be presented to you hopefully in February, but will be presented to you as and when it's ready. From my perspective, the national park application, whilst there is no, how can I put this? There is no overt coordination with either the housing application that came before it, nor with the current application to the south, nor are there any significant implications, in my view, in terms of non-coordination. So they have put forward a scheme which is on allocated land for employment purposes with an existing access. So the access both for vehicular and pedestrian purposes has no relationship to the development that's either been previously completed nor to that's proposed to the south. So from my perspective, there is no prejudicial impact on other sites in terms of this application being brought forward and considered on its own merits at this time. And as a result, the questions of that have been put forward in representations around seeking to consider both of these applications in tandem and together, I don't consider to be necessary from that point of view. I'll raise then just one or two other points that have been brought forward in representations. So paragraph 7.9 of your report sets out the representations made in terms of objections to the proposals. I think we've got 40 representations against and just one in support. They're very varied. Some of them significantly focus on the direct impacts of the proposals in this vicinity. Many of them look at the principle of development. So arguing effectively that the Helmsley plan is 10 or more years old and the issues around development in Helmsley have changed over that time. And as a result, suggesting that this site should be used for housing purposes as opposed to employment land. Also picking up on the fact that because the recent residential development has been completed, if you will, ahead of anything else, that the character has been overtly changed in this zone to be residential. Now, from the point of view of the plan, of course, the Helmsley plan remains the adopted plan for the locality, and as a result, the allocation remains. And as I say, the development is in my view, wholly otherwise in accordance with that plan. A number of representations raise issues around changing character. So, and picking up both in terms of the wider character, but also the direct amenity impacts that has in terms of the introduction of a non-residential use into this zone with its accompanying structures, paraphernalia, and activities and vehicular movements and such like that I've described previously. There's suggestion in those representations that if employment land is to be promoted in this locality, that it shouldn't be accessed via Ickle Drive, that it should be accessed via an alternative access to the west and out onto the little link road that goes to Hareham, instead of as say Ickle Drive, or potentially alternatively via Sawmill Lane, which you can sort of see comes in on that image from the west on the southern portion of the site. I'm not going to go through all of the representations in turn, but the overall feeling from residents is clearly that the proposals in terms of principle should revert to a housing proposal as opposed to employment, and that the the proposals will have an adverse impact on the character and amenity of the area by virtue of noise, disturbance, and the character of the building that's proposed. Okay, so I'll move to the recommendation. Like I said previously, the issues that are set out in the update in terms of a changed condition 10, in reality, I think that we could rely on the condition as penned, and I'll leave that to members to consider in the discussions following. There was some discussion on site with regards to the construction management plan, and that's set out on condition 7. At the moment, the construction management plan simply seeks, amongst other things, details of site working hours. There was some discussion as to whether that could be stipulated specifically, again, in order to create certainty in terms of your decision making today. Generally speaking, we would look at operational times on site between 8 o'clock and 6:30, no weekend and no bank holiday operations. So subject to those small changes to the conditions, and sorry, just before I conclude, sitting here thinking about a further element, the description of development at the moment simply looks at Class E. Now, if you're aware, the requirements of Class E of the use classes order is very open. It deals with all sorts of things, including shops and retail and such like. I suggest actually an additional condition which specifies the specific use as office use and associated workshop, etc., as opposed to leaving that only to the description of development. So that again would create certainty in terms of a requirement for a further planning application should for any reason the site be sought to be converted to an alternative use within use class E. So subject to those caveats, the recommendation is for approval, and I will rest there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now, I'm going to come to the tricky subject of public speakers. So normally public speaker is one objector, and there are a number of objectors in this case. So I have extended the public speaking from 3 minutes to 5 minutes to allow a cross-section of the objectors to present their case. I will be keeping this very strictly to time because we have 3 objectors listed to speak. So the first objector, Mr. Falkichov, has got one moment please, has got 2.5 minutes. Ms. Sumner has got 1 minute, and Mr. Skian, who's been surprised this morning because somebody has dropped out, has got 1.5 minutes. Now, Mr. Skian isn't prepared because he wasn't expecting to be able to speak, but we've made it available to him, so he's not as prepared as he would like to be. But I will still keep this really strictly to time. So once you've got your 2 minutes, 1 minute, 1.5 minutes, I'm afraid, people, that will be it. And then we will move on to the local member and the applicant's representative. Okay, it's just so that that is clear, because it's been a really tricky subject, this speaking situation. So, Mr. Falkichov, if you would like to, you can both come together, and like I say, I will keep this really strictly to timings. Okay, so ready?
Thank you, councillors, and please feel free to ask any of the objectors if you have any questions. The National Park sees itself as a guardian of landscape and biodiversity, as well as an exemplar planning authority. My ask is very simple, that North Yorkshire Council treats the National Parks application in the same way the park treats planning applications to it as a planning authority. The park refuses any application that's either incomplete or inaccurate. This application is both incomplete and inaccurate, and as such it should be rejected by this planning authority, or at the very least deferred so the applicant can address its deficiencies and consult properly with its potential neighbours. 1. The fact planning officer suggesting 18 conditions, including the provision of a missing construction management plan, is indicative of how poor this application is. 2. The standalone development of this site, EMP1, is against the Helmsley Town Plan, which calls for development to be coordinated with EMP2 and adjacent sites to ensure an integrated form of development, including vehicular and pedestrian accesses. The planning officer a moment ago admitted that there's no overt coordination. The officer's report fails to address the range of missing details, inaccuracies, such as a misleading claim there are no trees or hedges on or adjacent to the site. There are lots, including one in your photograph earlier on. There are lots, and as a result, tree survey under British Standard 5837 should have been submitted. No construction management plan is included, and the condition requiring one contains 18 points. Residents and councils need to know the details of the construction process, its impact on residents' quiet enjoyment of their homes and kids playing on the street, and what mitigation operating hours the applicant's proposing before granting permission, not hope it's sorted afterwards. The applicant admits there'll be more than 4 tonnes of diesel stored on the site for the use of their rangers. There's no hazardous substance plan included. For public safety, the council should reject or defer any decision until the park provides such a plan. The transport statement of plan are inadequate in the proposed section 1 and 6 agreement of £5,000 to monitor. The travel plan is laughable. You gave 75,000 for 8 houses earlier on this morning. 85% of staff, not 75%, arrive by car and will continue to do so without real alternatives. And with just 8 buses a day to Helmsley, staff will continue to drive. The 30-minute lunch break means staff will drive to the marketplace, negating supposed benefits, removing parking demand from Helmsley Town Centre and generating additional trips. The council should demand a better 106 or make Rickle Drive 20 mph and boost bus services. This application in front of the park, they've rejected.
No, I'm not going to any further. Thank you. You've got 1 minute, Miss Sumner. Thank you.
I'm not against the development of the site, but when I worked for the National Park, I recommended they take a more collaborative approach to the planning application, incorporating co-design with residents and also genuine community gain by facilitating a play street scheme on Rickle Drive to enable the many children that play there to continue to do so. They decided to ignore those recommendations and went for a more rapacious attitude towards the application. I was speaking really about the biodiversity net gain report in my now. Makes false statements which include that they did not adjust the site for the baseline report in June 2023. That is actually untrue. They did. They cut down all of the 6-foot high vegetation in February 23 and again prior to your site visit. This was actually a feeding area for lots of Swiss and is actually protected, but there is no PEA at all, and it ignores the location of a pond just 90 metres away from the site.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry. Good morning, members. The principal concern, and it's beyond argument, I think, expressed in the majority of the 43 published objections relates to the inevitable impact of the cumulative additions of traffic along what is now a residential street. The complete lack of coordination in this application and the one previous at Rymore Gardens significantly harms the prospects for development as envisaged by the plan. Both the applicant and the planning officer dismiss the need for or relevance of coordination. This despite their repeated advice to us that the plan must guide the process. In this respect, they reject the plan. A decision to proceed without appropriate coordination will deliver concentrated and permanent harm, particularly to the 21 households now directly fronting the access road. It is essential that members view this access before making a judgment, real coordination demands that the potential additional impact from further sites is considered when making your decision. I'm asking, please, would you defer your decision to allow one for a visit to the site and more particularly the access road, and perhaps to allow us to present our case properly? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Jabbar. Councillor Jabbar, because the objectors have had 5 minutes, you have 5 minutes.
I didn't realize that. Thank you very much. I might not be speaking for that long. Everyone made excellent case. Good afternoon, members. In addition to representing Helmsley or North Yorkshire Council, I'm a member of the North York Moors National Park Authority. Today is one of the rare occasions where a councillor is speaking on behalf of the community to argue for more houses in their backyard. This is a residential area, as you have seen from the site visit. So the Helmsley local plan made it clear that today's application should be coordinated with adjacent sites. The problem is that officer's report admits that the lack of coordination with the adjacent site is a significant element of deviation. These are the words in the report. Officer's report also concedes that developments such as the proposed office use in the application today will result in a change to the character of this area. So as the officer has just said, there is a planning application for the two adjacent sites, which you can see it on the screen. It was submitted to the council 2 years ago and involves housing on the right-hand side. This is the orange part, and commercial, industrial, and storage development on the other side, which is the yellow. Now, because this is a residential area, the local plan places an onerous requirement on the developer to establish a buffer zone between residential and industrial land. Now, if this is not achieved for those adjacent sites, then the remaining, those adjacent sites could be in their entirety used for housing only, which means that in addition to the orange part, there might be also housing on the yellow part, leading to additional 50 dwellings. So in this case, the site for today's application will be better used for housing, leading to an additional 10 more dwellings. The officer mentioned that the intention is to bring the other planning application to the February meetings, which is just 2 months' time. So I'm going to add my voice to the residents and to that of the local MP, Kevin Hollinray, and argue for this application to be deferred, to be considered with the other application, which is in front of you on the screen. This will also ensure that the buffer zone that, again, the officer has just mentioned is properly addressed. It is not unusual for this committee to defer planning application, as Councillor Burr has just said when it came to the first application today, that deferring an application sometimes could enhance it. And that application actually was deferred from the October meeting of this committee, which was just 2 months ago. And also, as we saw today in the case of the Bagby airfield, members commented that it was good that both applications about Bagby airfield came today to the committee on the same day, so that the members were able to consider all the issues. So what I'm suggesting is that by deferring this application until February, then hopefully the other application will be ready. They are all connected sites with each other, and then it will enable you to consider all the issues at the same time and make an informed decision. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Councillor Javov. And then I have the applicant's agent, Mr. Nichols. Mr. Nichols, I'll afford you the same 5 minutes as everybody else has had. Thank you very much.
Good morning, councillors, and thank you, Chair. And I won't take all of your 5 minutes. I'd like to thank the officer for his report, which sets out the main reasons for our proposal to move to a new HQ site in Helmsley. We have been based at the old vicarage and in a part-owned, part-leased site in Sawmill Lane for many years. Both sites are at the point of needing substantial investment, but neither are suitable as modern workplaces. So our members took the decision to develop proposals for a new building. We are keen to stay in Helmsley as part of our long-standing commitment to the town over the last 50 years. The move will offer long-term sustainability and energy efficiency, which will bring significant cost savings and operational benefits, and that will help us deliver our statutory park purposes more efficiently in the coming decades. Prior to buying this piece of land, we had pre-application support from, at the time, Rydale District Council planning staff, who confirmed that the land was designated for employment under the current Helmsley local plan. The site already has light industrial use with the historic England storage unit and the old print works. And after purchase, we had similar pre-application support from the NYC planning team. As you've heard, the Helmsley local plan is the blueprint for the town's development over a 15-year period, and it was endorsed by the town council and local people at the time when it was adopted, and it's now part of NYC's development plan. The officer's report assesses the development against a range of planning matters, concluding that the building is a high quality design incorporating traditional materials such as stone on the main elevations reflecting local housing and traditional walling as found elsewhere in Helmsley. We made a number of important changes to the design following consultation and feedback with residents. This included moving the entrance to the visitor car park in front of the building from Rickle Drive, and it's now accessed off the service road instead. We've incorporated greater use of natural stone and timber on the public facing parts of the building, as well as following the local vernacular in using dry stone walls as part of the boundary to the site to complement our planning scheme. Another element of the proposal that was amended following public consultation was the treatment of the land to the north. Whilst the land is not part of the planning application, residents requested that we naturally landscape the site. This detail is highlighted in the planning and access statement. We'll ensure that our landscaping provides a high degree of natural benefit. In addition, the surface permissive path to Station Road, providing a shorter route to the town centre, will be a significant access improvement. We most certainly take note of residents concerned over increased levels of traffic on Rickle Drive. We are fully committed to the travel plan submitted as part of the application and endorsed by the local highway authority. And key measures in that are a mandatory 20-mile-an-hour speed limit for our people using Rickle Drive, positive incentives for car sharing and using public transport, and great facilities to encourage more cycling, including e-bike charging points, changing rooms and showers. It's worth remembering that we're not a large employer and our working hours are largely confined to normal business hours, Monday to Friday. Our plans will not result in any additional vehicle movements in Helmsley whatsoever and will free up on-street parking in the town as we will build sufficient car parking on the site for our needs. We are committed to being a good neighbour and believe that the office and ranger depot is compatible with the established commercial and residential use in this location and is on land designated as suitable for employment purposes. Thank you, councillors and chair.
Right, I'm going to give you the opportunity to reply to some of those issues that have been raised. But would you clarify for me? I'm sorry, members, I want this out in the open. What the plan position is, because my understanding was that it was part of Rydale's local plan strategy, which is still operable. It's part of the Helmsley plan strategy, which is still operable. We spent a great deal of time when we were Rydale District Council securing employment land in Helmsley, which was really difficult to find, as I recall, and what all those tied together are, because as far as I'm concerned, they went out for examination in public. It was all found to be sound. Is there anything that's changed that would affect those positions? Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. So clearly there is an awful lot going on in the world of planning at the moment between the new MPPF and the emerging local plan for North Yorkshire. At the moment, the MPPF carries full weight as of the 12th. It specifically sets out that it carries full weight from day one. However, that doesn't change any of the material considerations that we're looking at in terms of the determination of this application. You're absolutely right. Otherwise, the development plan remains the Rydale local plan and the Helmsley plan. So they sit together as tandem documents as part of the development plan. So they carry full weight and continue to carry full weight. We don't consider that the policies that are being assessed in terms of the determination of this application today become out of date or irrelevant as a result of the MPPF. Clearly, there are much wider questions being raised by the MPPF in terms of housing delivery. However, that doesn't then supersede allocations for employment purposes. So clearly, we will be having discussions with you in the future about different elements of the MPPF and how they then impact on proposals as and when they come to you. But certainly from that perspective, there's no change in terms of the development plan. A couple of other things coming out of the speaker's commentary. So construction management plan, that is something that we routinely condition. It is very unusual to require a construction management plan during the course and part of the determination of the application itself. They would generally form a requirement for submission of details to be submitted post-development. Some of those things can be prior to commencement if there are particular issues. So if members had particular concerns around elements of the proposals, we could reinforce that condition to require submission of details at an earlier date. But otherwise, this site isn't an unusual site in terms of its position and layout. Certainly going back to my past history working in Edinburgh, we had very difficult sites from that point of view, to the point that the construction requirements became a determining matter during the course of the application. This, in my view, isn't one of those. Issues around tree survey. So there is a tree on the site. Clearly, members visiting the site at on Monday will have seen that there's some fairly small tree on the site. That will be lost as a result of the proposals. But clearly, the landscaping scheme for the site itself includes a significant, I don't know how many offhand, but a significant number of trees. The area to the north, as we've heard, isn't part of the application itself. It is an absolute intention that the National Park carry out the proposals in terms of the landscaping of that area, but is not otherwise an area that we're looking to address in this application. The issues around, lost my place slightly, the issues around diesel storage and such like, there are lots of regulations that they have to comply with in terms of storage and handling of fuel on site. The amount of fuel that's been stored doesn't trigger a requirement for a hazardous substances consent or anything of that nature. So from a planning point of view, while storage of diesel on site is something that we would have some cognizance of, double bunded tanks and such like, that there's no other requirements from my perspective that would cause us an issue in terms of the determination of this application. I think that was all. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to open it up for questions, but I have some, so just bear with me while I bring them up, because I want to deal with them so that we're clear with everything. So we've done the plan. Condition number 7, which is on page 109, which relates to in particular, it's relating to the point 9, which is the detail of the site working hours, which I know has cropped up already this morning. And we did the site visit on Monday, and we were very aware of the residential amenity off those properties on Rickle Drive. And I don't think it's unreasonable for us to say that, you know, work shouldn't start before 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning at the very earliest, and it should be finished by 6:30 at night, with nothing at the weekend and nothing at bank holidays. And I think that was raised by some of the objections that have come forward. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask to protect the residential amenity. Condition 11, which I think is relating to the boundary screening, and we talked about this on site. I appreciate we're losing a tree, but I also can see from what's being proposed that we're going to put more trees in than we are losing. But actually there need to be the heavy standard planting rather than, you know, bits of saplings that are going to take 30 or 40 years to grow up. We need it to be a better option, I think, to protect residential amenity. And then condition 15, and this is to do with external lighting. And I'm really quite keen that there's no external lighting that would again impact on the residential amenity of that site, and that most of that external lighting needs to be downlighted. There needs to be a recognition of dark skies, which I think national parks are leading on in any case, and PIR sensors so that it's only triggered as and when it's necessary in dark. So those are the things that I've picked up from the report. So I'll now throw it open to fellow members for questions. So Councillor Baker, then Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Napton, and Councillor Burr, and then Councillor Mason. Right, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I just ask, on the picture that you showed of the building, there appears to be no security fencing around the car park. Am I correct in that? And if at some later stage the development felt the need for security fencing to prevent people using the car park out of normal office hours, and you all know where I'm going with that, would they need to have planning permission for security fencing?
Okay, so at the moment, you could have fencing which is not adjacent to the highway up to 2 meters in height without planning permission. So in answer to the first part of your question, that's perfect. So in answer to your question, the only security fencing that's shown is within the compound. So the first part of the car park so if you go past the building, turn left into the site, the staff car park and such like is not fenced in. There's then a security fence that goes right away around the compound itself behind the building. So there's no security fencing proposed in the front part where the visitor car parking is. Notionally, if that was considered to be a concern, you could add a condition that removed permitted development rights for fencing specifically. So along the road frontage, one could put a fence up to 1 meter in height without planning permission, or otherwise on the site up to 2 meters in height without planning permission. So one could remove those permitted development rights by virtue of a condition.
I'm not sure whether it is better to not have any fencing at all, or there to be fencing from a resident's point of view. But I will have a think about that.
Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm trying to get a better understanding of what the impact on the local residents and the community is going to be in terms of vehicle movements, etc. I mean, it was one of the speakers referred to it being a small workforce. What is the definition of a small workforce? what numbers. I'm trying to work out vehicle movements. Do the public have access to this building? So are we going to get public movements? Is there a conference facility there when other agencies? I know I've been to the current headquarters. So you do get, I want to better understand what the whole picture is. It's not just about a few people working in offices. Obviously there's movement with the workers coming in as well. So I just need to better understand and drill down into that area for the impact on the residents and the community.
So the issues here are, I suppose, mixed up because of the whole home working scenario and these sorts of things additionally. However, clearly it is the public face of the national park. So it reasonably could be accessed by members of the public. And bearing in mind on days like today, they also run a planning committee, and therefore one would have an expectation of on certain days a much more significant number of vehicles using the access as they do at the moment in the town centre. Clearly, the other parts of that are around the ranger service. And they have a number of four-wheel drive vehicles, trailers and such like, which are coming in and out of that site. They tend to be out in the morning, back in the late afternoon, or at this time of year, slightly earlier, but could be going equally in and out during the day, carrying out tasks in the near locality. So it's very variable in my view. I think they have about 60 staff on site, so potentially. But again, we've all seen from that point of view, even looking at the operation of this building here, that the number of officers here at any one time is vastly reduced from what it used to be because of home working scenarios. So yes, there is a change, and I would say that would be a change that would be perceived in the locality, particularly in the morning and the afternoon. However, the road is designed in such a way that it is capable of taking that load, and it would allow then for the free flow of traffic along, so we don't have an issue in terms of, and I use the National Park HQ, I suppose, as an example, that their access at the moment is very tight. It's off Bongate with the footway and such like at the foot of the site. It's not great. The layout here is designed in order to cope with the capacity of the building and the capacity of their operation. The car park obviously is significantly bigger than their existing situation, which currently results in parking on, and I forget the name of the road to the north of the HQ site, but parking in the vicinity on the highway and on legally, don't get me wrong, but within that zone. I suppose the summary of that is there is an impact. We don't consider it to be significant in terms of the amenity or road safety, and that the site and layout of the site is designed to cope with that capacity.
Councillor Lapton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Sorry, I've got a couple, 2 or 3 points, but just to follow up on Councillor Taylor's point there, obviously at the moment the existing headquarters, which I wholly support moving out of there, it's not fit for purpose, but that is used by the town council as the town council chamber as well, and I don't know what other organisations meet there on an evening, but understanding the traffic movements, is the national park proposing to let out the facility to third parties outside their normal hours of operation? That's my first point.
Don't have any details on that, I'm afraid. In terms of the permission, if that was granted, then as it stands, provided it still sits within the use class in terms of its operations, then it would be compliant. The question, I suppose, would be if, for instance, it became if it fell into a different use class, so it was being rented out, and I can't think of a good use, but for yes, absolutely, for carrying out parties or I don't know, sports events or something of that nature, yoga classes or some such. You could see a scenario in that case whereby it would change that scenario, but effectively subject to the condition that I've suggested additionally would require planning permission.
Thank you. So I think that clarifies that. Thank you. So I'm coming on, and I know we discussed this on site, but I just wanted to say this in the meeting and just understand it completely. That rendering shows the restoration of the signal box. Well, the signal box is in a derelict state. So just for clarification, that even though the signal box there is shown as restored, the National Park are not giving any funding to restore the historic signal box.
For the purposes of this application, the signal box is not relevant. Their rendering is not accurate.
Thanks. I just wanted to make that point. And the third thing was, you talked about the link path and the way we should put to that be simply because the second part of the link path, the existing one that you showed on the photographs, isn't a registered public right of way. So I just wanted to understand what would be the method by which that could be registered as a public right of way, or is it always going to have a sort of Damocles hanging above it?
Okay, I might refer to my legal colleagues at this point, but so two elements to this. Firstly, should a landowner come along and seek to close that footpath, one would imagine, and I can give no guarantees, but one would imagine that the users of that footway would contest that closure. At which point we'd almost certainly end up in a public inquiry, and we would then be looking at the evidence that was, in terms of its use and the longevity of that use and the type of use, number of times that people walked it a day, all of these sorts of things, in order to establish whether or not, by virtue of its continuous use, it had become a public right of way. How that then works in terms of the legalities is sort of the end of my knowledge. The other way round, so again, my understanding is that third parties, could be anybody, could then promote that as a public right of way and effectively go through that same process. So it is advertised accordingly. The owners, if it is in ownership, because it may not be, it may be untitled and registered land, would then have an opportunity to object to that process. It would be a matter then for the Highway Authority to seek to carry out that change to the definitive map.
Because it would seem to me that if the part of the application is to facilitate that footway, and there's some, and the applicant put some weight on that in people being able to access the town centre, etc., that it would seem to me logical that the national park would positively seek that process. They're in a good position, they've got staff, they've got legal representatives, they would be a good body to push that forward. Can we make that, would we be able to make that a planning requirement that they pursue that, that registration to complete their link to the town centre?
Okay, so in the report, bearing in mind, the route between the site and the town centre via Rickle Drive is about 1,700 metres or thereabouts to the facilities in town. Via the permissive footway, it's about 700 metres, so it's quite a lot nearer via the permissive route. Because it's not a public footpath, in the planning balance, I'm effectively not giving it any significant weight. The result of that is that if the permissive footway wasn't proposed and the existing footpath wasn't there, my recommendation wouldn't be any different. So from my perspective, and there's two parts to my answer, from my perspective, I don't consider that there's a necessity to do that. The second part to my answer, I suppose, is in terms of should members not agree with me and seek to require that as a condition or part of a Section 106 agreement, I think there's a difficulty because it's in third party ownership. So we've had situations a little bit akin to this previously, whereby we were looking to carry out improvements to an existing footpath, to upgrade them to cycleway and such like. And it turned out that the applicant didn't have any access to the land, and so it was ultra vires in those terms. It was effectively an unlawful condition. My worry here would be if we were to insist on that requirement, and clearly we have the national park in the room, if we were to insist on that requirement as an absolute requirement of a permission, there is a significant chance that they can't achieve that outcome for a number of reasons. We just don't know. Now, clearly, if members consider that this development is only acceptable if that can be guaranteed, then there would be a process that would have to be gone through predetermination in order to establish that that could be done. As I say, my view on this is that the location is acceptable by virtue of the local plan allocation as an employment site, and therefore the legalities of all of those other scenarios fall away because the site is otherwise acceptable for development for employment purposes. Now, clearly the park have sought to establish that link. I can only hope that, as I say, with them being in the room and listening to this conversation, that they would seek to guarantee that, if you will, as much as is reasonably possible within that framework.
Thank you. Because I think when members of the public have talked about the coordination or whatever of these three sites, as it were, within the site, I mean, that's obviously relevant to the proposed employment land to the south, because they would also use that footway. So though I understand you cannot, well, it would be unreasonable to put a condition on the national parks that they must deliver this right of way, I would think it was reasonable to put a condition on that they must pursue it to the legal end to see whether it can legally be registered as a public right of way. Obviously, if that fails through a public inquiry or whatever, well, you know, that's not within their hands, but at least they will have tried to secure that link. And as you say, it's another kilometre if people have got to walk into town. That's just the point I'm making.
Right, I'm going to bring Alpha in as the monitoring officer and legal, because we're into areas that are difficult because we don't. It's a third party piece of land, so I'm going to let you speak on that, and then if it can't be conditioned, can it be an informative? And what's the difference between a condition and an informative? All right, thank you.
So just to clarify the legal position with the public rights of way arising, they can either arise through long use by the public uninterrupted for under several years. It's a long process, or it can arise because it's dedicated by the landowner specifically for that purpose. So I think the scenario being described is where you would be seeking the landowner to dedicate, and obviously that is speculative at this point because that's not what's before us.
I'll just follow up on that slightly. So we have sought to require the implementation of the permissive route by condition. So effectively for them to provide that, set out condition 12, but not gone any further from that perspective for the reasons I've outlined. I guess from that perspective, the question is one of risk, because the route is there. It is used, but I've not given it any significant weight for the reasons I've outlined, because there is a risk there that it would be lost at some point in the future. And I'll leave it there.
Councillor Burr.
Thank you, Chairman. Some of my colleagues have touched on what I wanted to talk about. I've got two questions. If this were to be approved, I think that a condition should be that footpath is pursued to the end, that it becomes a legal footpath. The good people of Yorkshire love their footpaths. And if you want to cause an argument, or if you want to take something away that they have used for many, many years, then a fight will be had. I know this, and I do think that they have every right, as they've walked that footpath for such a long time, and it links up with the big picture of where we are going. So to save that, it would be, if it were approved, a condition that unfortunately we don't agree with this unless that is pursued as a permitted footpath. So I think our officer has said that it can be done, it can be conditioned, and I think Alpha has mentioned what we could do. So that would be something that I would be thinking about. And I think our officer, I think you are correct in holding your hands up and saying it is quite mixed up. And that's the worry of all this. It is mixed up. So first of all, that public footpath, an absolute given. Moving on, I am thinking that this is more of a relocation of a site that's not acceptable, and it's an office block. So then I listened to the speaker and I thought, well, it's a small workforce. But then Councillor Taylor sort of, touched on my question. It's actually not a small workforce, is it? Because 50 and under is small, and we've had a quote of 60. So is it small? Is it large? That will really affect the public. That really will affect how the use is going to be. So I think that we should put conditions on about the opening hours. But then again, I'm mixed up, because an office would be 9 till 5, which would be acceptable. But then you, Madam Chairman, you've said about sort of, well, 7 or whatever. Well, maybe people don't go to work at 7 if they have an office, I don't know, but that has a massive impact on the residents, which is now there. So we have to consider this all in the round, and I do think our officer is right saying it is a very mixed up situation that we are put in, because all that traffic is not just 9 to 5. We all come at 9, maybe a bit of home working, so maybe a few of those 60 people who work there, it might not be 60, it might be 50, but it doesn't sound like that to me. It sounds like much, much more. So if our officer could just say about the conditions, could it not be 9 till 5, which then would reduce the traffic, because that's what happens in the centre of Helmsley at that site, because that's an office use, and that's predominantly 9 till 5. Thank you.
Okay, so a couple of things. I'll start with back to the footpath. So in other circumstances, and I'm thinking of where we're trying to require housing to be allocated and such like, but we don't clearly know what's going to happen, we use expressions like reasonable steps to be taken. It's a bit woolly and not something I like, because clearly I would like to be in a position of certainty, but I'm not going to be able to give you a position of certainty. So all I would be able to give you, and I would be more comfortable with an informative, because I don't think a condition would actually meet the test set out in the MPPF in terms of being precise and reasonable, etc., etc. I think there is mileage for use of an informative, but all an informative does is ask. It doesn't tell. So it effectively asks the applicant to carry out those steps in order to, in this case, make the site, if you will, more sustainable by virtue of connectivity. I'll leave that there. Opening times, my understanding of the way that the park operates is that the offices are open effectively, and I don't 100% know their opening times, but it's 7:30 in the morning till 7:30 in the evening. The site otherwise does still operate. So the Sawmill Lane site is open at the weekends. Bearing in mind the Ranger Service goes out and carries out emergency works, there's somebody on duty. It's not the same as it is during the week, but there is availability for access to the site. So in my view, it wouldn't be appropriate from their operations point of view to effectively simply close the site at, let's say, 7:30 on a Friday, and for it to be closed, there has to be access over the weekend and potentially 24/7. However, that access is very limited. So the Sawmill Lane site, it's literally a couple of vehicles in and out of that site during the day at the weekend, depending upon what's happening and if there are events on in the park and if there are, the volunteer service operate from there as well. So it is much more limited at weekend than it is during the week. But they do have activities at the weekend.
Councillor Mason.
The footpath thing is really interesting. I'm finding this quite interesting, actually. I'm just a bit concerned that we're opening ourselves up to approve something. Then the landowner's going to go, hey, you know what? You're not having access. It does worry me that we're kind of almost putting the cart before the horse on this one. So as strong a condition as possible in that. But I'm actually going to focus back on to what is it Mrs. Sumner has said. The biodiversity of that site prior to 2023, I think it was locally well known. And it is a concern looking at the email that I've received here that there was no preliminary ecological survey done. It sounds like it was just a walkover. Is that right? I'm trying to pick out what survey was actually done. Because it does concern me that it's the national park are doing this. We don't seem to have a proper environmental impact assessment. And if anyone's going to prefer a deferment, and I have a question about what Councillor Jabor said about deferring, is I would defer to actually get a proper impact assessment, environmental impact assessment, because this is the national park, and I'm sure if the application was in their jurisdiction, we'd be going for an environmental impact assessment. So you have to clarify that. I've just sort of come into this, but the other question is, and Councillor Jabor was saying that he would like to defer to try and deal with two applications together. I'm pretty sure legally we can't do that. As far as I know, we have to deal with this application as this application. That's right, isn't it? So I don't like the grandstanding on that sort of thing, to be honest. I think we need to focus on this application. But I would, and I don't know, it's going to questions, but I'd propose deferral on environmental impact assessment.
Okay, so there is no requirement for environmental impact assessment. It's simply too small a site. It doesn't hit any of the criteria under the regulations. So there's no requirement from that point of view. Ecology, clearly ecology is an issue. There was a suggestion of trashing of the site as a result of the works that have been undertaken. The site, for anybody who didn't see it before Monday, a few weeks ago, was grown out to about 1.5 meters, 2 meters in height, I suppose. Grasses and other such materials that have clearly been flail mowed. My understanding was that has happened in the past, that the place has been flail mowed in the past. The ecology survey has been assessed by our council's ecologist and found to be perfectly satisfactory. The way that biodiversity net gain now works is, well, twofold. A question of, has the survey work that's been undertaken to establish the baseline been done following the removal of the habitat? Because then that would be trashing. That's not the case here. So as far as I'm concerned, the ecology and the timing of the ecology survey work is entirely appropriate in terms of that baseline. The proposals are for the delivery of biodiversity net gain off-site, and they've said primarily. So effectively other sites within the national park where and that's a perfectly legitimate thing to happen. There's no technical or legal issue with that. Because it's off-site, we require a Section 106 agreement, but we would also add we have the way it works today is that effectively we don't have to have all of those details in order to make a decision. The requirements of biodiversity net gain set out in the Act are that there's a statutory condition which is added to all permissions where there is a biodiversity net gain requirement. So there are a load of exemptions for little sites and domestic stuff and what have you, where that doesn't apply. But for this sort of thing, the requirement in terms of submission is the baseline assessment, and that's it. We don't need anything else. And we apply the statutory condition, which requires all sorts of things. It's about 5 pages long, in terms of where it's going to go, what it is, how it's going to be monitored, any requirements for additional monies in order to monitor those things. That's all dealt with under that statutory condition, which almost sits separate. It's an odd situation because there is a link in the legislation between biodiversity net gain and planning, but it's only a it's a relatively tenuous one because we don't get to assess it in terms of the determination of the planning application. So it's a bit of an oddity from that perspective. However, because they're proposing it off-site, as I say, the requirements are bolstered somewhat more by the requirement for that to be set out in the Section 106 agreement. So post-decision, on the assumption that the recommendation is supported, we would then be penning Section 106 agreement, which would set out all of these things in detail in order that they then comply with the requirements of that statutory condition. EIA ecology delay. So in terms of delay, it is reasonable for you to look at applications and their relationship to one another, bearing in mind you've got a condition, a criteria within the allocation policy to look for coordination. That's not an unreasonable or, in my view, unlawful position to be in. The issue would be that if members were to seek deferral on that basis, you'd need to be really clear about why and what it is, therefore, we're looking to coordinate. So from my perspective, we've got a proposal which would have been in the old days a B1 use as an office use, which is otherwise reasonable to be located within a residential area by virtue of smell, noise, nuisance from that perspective. So it's a relatively low-key use in terms of its location in proximity to residential properties. The issue, more likely, would be the relationship to the next proposal in terms of its impact on this proposal. So, in other words, if you were to put, there's a sawmill down the lane. If you'd put a sawmill next to this site, then there would be a question about whether that had a prejudicial impact on the operation of this office. So I can't see particularly a scenario whereby this proposal would be prejudicial to a proposal to the south from that perspective. The agent of change, as they set out in the MPPF, would be the other way around. So I'm bearing in mind in terms of employment uses, this is almost sort of the lowest common denominator from that perspective, because it would otherwise be acceptable in a urban location, a residential location. So yeah, from my perspective, I don't see that there's any need or necessity to delay in order for those two things to marry up in terms of decision making. But I don't think it would be unlawful from that point of view. The only other thing I would say to that is that all applications are to be considered on their individual merits.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah. No, still.
Did you want a question?
At this stage, I'll wait to the debate.
Fine. Councillor Mason.
My only other question is going back to the BNG, and I think it's the state that in here said it would be useful to confirm that the applicant intends to register the off-site land in Natural England for BNG purposes. Can we condition that?
No. So the way it works, and this is getting into greater and greater levels of complexity, the way it works is that our councils, North Yorkshire Council, operates It's a system called Mycelia, whereby we have all of the proposed biodiversity net gain sites and any developments that benefit from those sites all registered on a system. So you imagine it's geographically driven, to be fair, but you imagine it's effectively a matrix with all of those things. It's an accounting process, so that we can measure the number of habitat units for the different types of habitat, where they are, and who it is that's using them. So notionally, you could have, a farmer down the road here who sets aside a load of fields for biodiversity net gain purposes. He enters into a Section 106 agreement with the council in order to protect that land. It's a contract that effectively says we're going to do X, Y, and Z, so we can hold them to that. They then register on our system. That's all reported to Natural England. So the system it's already done. So it is kind of a work in progress, to be fair, but those stepping stones are being taken. The system is up and running. It needs a little honing.
Councillor Baker, do you have another question?
Yes, it's coming back to my initial question about this site. I can see, I'm imagining if I'm a resident and I'm looking out at that at the minute and it's lovely, and my young children, imagining it again, on an evening, I'll go out there and use it for cycling, skateboarding or whatever. And eventually there might become tensions between the applicant and the residents as it being used on an evening. I mean, we all get that scenario, don't you? And the applicant then decides, I'm going to put security fencing up, which you apparently say they can do that without planning permission, and that could create more tension. I would like to see so that in the future, if the applicant or the residents wanted security fencing around that public parking area, which is or any of the other bits of the site, that it needs to come for planning, which I believe, Peter, you said we could do that. And I think that, because I think at the moment, as a resident, although I'm not happy with the planning application, that is quite acceptable a view. But if they suddenly put security fencing up, it will make it look awful. But they might want it in the future.
Can I come in on that and just pick that up? Because one of the things I was going to ask is, it's a substantial area of visitor parking. It's a substantial area of staff parking. The ranger area, I think you said, was already enclosed, so there's no access into the area behind where the rangers operate from. But from a point of view of, and we've had this in the local area, antisocial behaviour in the use of car parks, I think it would be wholly appropriate to put condition on that actually restricts those car parking areas, particularly in the evenings and at the weekends, to prevent the antisocial use of those parking areas. So it kind of picks up on what Alison's suggesting, but I want to just take that a bit further, because if you've got open areas of car park, you suddenly have a magnet for people with souped up cars and things that would then really impact the residential amenity. And I think it should be incumbent on the applicant to make that position as clear as it can be, that those spaces, those car parking areas, are not open, that they are closed off and secure when they're not there.
Okay, so I have a condition in mind that hopefully meets both requirements, and that would affect, and I don't have the whole wording here, but effectively to remove permitted development rights for fencing, but for fencing to be, I can read my own writing, a condition to for the submission of a scheme to restrict vehicular parking outside office hours, but requiring also the removal of the permitted development rights for fencing.
Thinking about a gate security or
Indeed,
something of that,
yes,
of
indeed.
that
Or even a
nature,
barrier, so
or a barrier of some kind to prevent access
Yes.
into those areas.
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you. Right. Anybody, any other questions? Right, okay. I've got a small one, okay, which goes to the commercial use of the area, which is not being considered at the moment, because at the moment we've got this application, but there's other land we've got no applications for at the moment, and it isn't about, but it's all ties in really with this highways access, because what would be to prevent, I'm going to really stir it up here, sorry, what would prevent us from having a McDonald's or a food outlet or some other use of that commercial area which will further impact the residents? So I'm trying to get this balance, because it is employment land and we have no control at the moment what that employment might be.
Okay, so you do, because the categories of use that are set out in the policy don't go that far. And effectively they revert back to the old use classes order, but effectively looking for small business units and storage. So it wouldn't then allow for Aldi or whoever to move in. Clearly those sorts of operators, so at that scale, you're then looking at other requirements in terms of impact on the town centre and such like. So there would be a number of other issues that would be raised that we would look to assess under other policies from that perspective. However, the policy simply doesn't allow that in any case. My commentary about the use classes order and the reference to the office use and associated as set out in the application was in part to sort of take cognizance of that possibility, in order that what you see before you in terms of use is what is mandated in any permission.
Thank you for that. I just was looking for that clarity, because it's obviously the highways issues are obviously bubbling within the community. I just need to make sure that we're not exacerbating it. Right, I'm going to throw it open to debate. Councillor Taylor's already indicated he wanted to speak. Councillor Baker, Councillor Burr.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Mr. Jones, the officer, actually has addressed some of the points I was going to make. I mean, it's clear from the debate we've had, the number of questions, that there's a lot of loose ends around this at the moment. There's, we could sit here all day, I think, and we could still all come up with questions. So, I do think there is some further work to be done here, and I hear what the officer said in relation to Councillor Mason's. I don't know whether you were proposing a deferment there or not, or whether that's. No, I understand that. I'm just concerned that this is a major application that we're considering here with quite serious issues, and we need to get it right. That's the point I'm making. And I have still got, there is still possibly lots of unanswered questions, more detail. And so I just throw that open there to see what the rest of the committee think about that.
Councillor Baker.
I think I tend to agree with you, Councillor Taylor, on that. One of the things I would have liked to have seen in this application, and I know they've touched on, and I know the northern bit of the plot isn't part of this application, but it is touched on in condition 12. I would have liked to have seen that area as part of the application as an amenity area for the residents of Recall Drive. Whatever form that would take, would be, I know somebody mentioned that there wasn't a pond, seating, or a green space that the residents of Recall Drive could use, because at present it's a bit of a wasted space. And as I say, the area that is the parking space will be used as a playground on an evening. I could envisage that, because that's what children do. So, but as I say, I would have liked to see, if Councillor Taylor is saying we look at it for further consideration, and the applicant has, I feel, missed a trick here, for want of a better word, in that they could have proposed a very nice development of that area to the north of the road, which would have sweetened the pill, I want to say, for the residents of Recall Drive. Thank you.
Can I just bring Peter in before I bring you in, Lindsay, just so that, right, okay.
Yeah, I take the point with regard to sweetening the issue, and clearly we could give that more weight had it been within the scope of the red line and was formed then part of the application, as opposed to the way it's set out. It's a bit of an odd parcel of land because it's kind of lost as a result of the service road. It's probably not really deep enough to actually build anything substantive on, although technically is clearly within the allocation. From my perspective, there is no reliance on the delivery of that. And, you know, if that was simply taken out of the equation altogether and not considered in any way or form, the recommendation wouldn't change. So, and the idea that a third party applicant, notwithstanding it's the national park as opposed to, I don't know, Wicks, there's no requirement in the allocation for the applicant to be providing land for third parties or amenity space or anything of that sort at all. So I think there's a real risk there in terms of effectively making a requirement that we can't support through the policy.
Councillor Burr.
Thank you. So where do I start? I've got so much to say. I know Helmsley. I lived in Sinnington. I think that people are very reasonable and want to work together. And missing a trick, I don't know if I would use that as a terminology in planning, but everybody wants to get to a point where everyone feels comfortable. It's like negotiating. If everyone feels that they're happy with something, then that's what we're all here to achieve. Now, every application is speculative, and, you know, if it falls, it falls. That's democracy. However, we have policies and we actually follow those policies. And I've sat on planning for a lot of years, and I've always felt that I need to listen to the local ward member or division member first. Then I like to listen to what the actual residents are saying and our officers as well. So it's a big mix. And our officer, I think, has been put in an awkward position because he has to deal with what he has to deal with. However, there are some fundamental issues for me that I can't square. And I think with this particular application, I'm feeling around the room that we're sort of liking it, but we're trying to pop conditions on here, there, and everywhere to make it fit. That doesn't stand square with me. That's just how I am. So when I'm uneasy, I don't want to go down that route, because I feel that there's too many issues that aren't clear and we don't feel happy about, but we're going to try and make it fit because then the application can go through. So I think what we need to do is we need to stand back, and I'm quite consistent in the way I deal as a councillor, as it was pointed out by the division member. If I'm not happy, I would prefer a deferral, because, like I've said this morning, we got to some really good outcomes this morning by collectively agreeing to not agree, but then it came down the path in a few more months and we felt happy to stamp it and say we agree. So on the basis of all that, and I haven't even gone into biodiversity, design, blah, 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 I would like to have another think about this, and I will support the division member, and I would propose a deferral because I feel it's prejudicial to the housing site, but also prejudicial to the prospective housing that is coming down the line and could have an impact on their quiet enjoyment of living in an area. So that is where I'm coming from. I'm trying to look at the big picture. As being consistent as I was this morning, I'm looking at the big picture. I'm given a reason why I'm looking at the big picture, why we need to go back. We need to take into consideration both plans, because both plans work together. I don't think we're quite there yet. I don't like the design. I don't think it does anything for the area. Blah, blah, blah. I could go on and on. So that is my proposal to the committee. If they want to agree to that, that's fine. If they don't, then I understand that. But it is the quiet enjoyment rights that housing developments have a right to have. So we've got to take that into consideration. And also, we as a council, we do want more houses. So we would be saying to ourselves, we really want no objections to these houses because we want to pass them. So that is where I'm coming from. I might not even get a seconder, but that's just my opinion on our conundrum that we're in.
So just to be clear, Councillor Burt, you're gonna move deferral. You're going to propose this item's deferred, and you're satisfied with the reasons you've given, right? Oh, sorry, Lindsay, you should have had your microphone on. Sorry.
Did you hear that? Good.
Councillor Mason.
It was really to come back on something, and I'm minded to actually to second Lindsay's the proposal. Is we're having so many discussions as councillors in the development plan. We're talking about placemaking rather than just so we're bringing a more of a holistic approach to everything. And it was mentioned earlier, Alison, you mentioned about the green spacing and everything else like that as part of the application. And I just wanted to come back and challenge a little bit about that's where this council is going. And I do wonder whether we can, I don't know, go back to the applicant maybe and look at how better or more green spacing or anything else like that that actually is built into this. Because I actually don't see in this application some of the placemaking ambition that the council is trying to achieve in developing the new plan going forward. Now, granted, I know the plan hasn't come forward, but it is an ambition and discussion that the development plan committee is having.
Yeah.
So I will second it.
I think my starting point clearly is the local plan. We need to be really, really careful that we don't try to start using matters which have been discussed as part of the new plan, which clearly carries no weight. So we've got to be cognizant of the fact that this is an allocated employment site, that the notion that it might notionally be refused on the basis of its relationship to housing is considered in the allocation. Those matters have already been dealt with through a democratic and consultative process. So the idea that, this site, and as I say, the type of use that's proposed in terms of it being an employment use is effectively the lowest common denominator. So, I can understand if we were in a situation whereby we were considering, I don't know, a series of storage sheds or B1 uses with HGV traffic coming to and from, that you start to get into a different type of assessment. The reality with this proposal is that the type of traffic that one would expect, the amount of traffic, the type of impacts that one would expect from the development are consistent with a residential area. And so it not only does it fit otherwise in terms of the allocation, but actually the use that's proposed is considered to be entirely acceptable in a residential location. So I'm struggling a little bit to know what we would do in terms of any additional assessment or additional work to understand or to provide additional information to members in order to enable you to make a decision in those terms.
Councillor Napton.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think My concern is around sort of sustainability, but it's about the footpath link, as I mentioned in questions. And that seems really important to me. It's really important, I think, for the people who are working at the people who are working on this site. Some of them will have been working in the old headquarters, and at the old headquarters, it's a building not fit for purpose. But one thing it did have in its benefit is you could quickly nip out for a sandwich, and it's that facility of being able to walk into town, not by 1.6 kilometres, but by 6.6. I think that was the figure anyway. I think it's really important for the site, and I know this isn't this application, but it is important. And this is where we come down to this coordinated and uncoordinated, is that it's that footpath link is actually important to the employment land to the south, because there'll be lots who don't know what that application is, and that's part of the problem. But it's going to be various people working who need to pop into town, and we don't want to discourage them from getting in their car and driving all the way around and then parking in the town. That footpath link is really important. So what I would support deferment, and my reason for that would be that I really want to see some information about how the national park could support the registering of the public right of way. Now, it may be that they could support that process, and the conclusion of that might be that it can't happen. But I really think at this stage it's very important that we do our best as a committee to secure that link, not only for this site, but for the southern site, and indeed for the residents who live at this end of Rickle Drive.
Yeah, I do agree with you, Nigel, because I was going to come in before you said that. We've had the amount of people employed there come up now as an issue. We've had the footpath come up as an issue. I still think more should be done on biodiversity assessments as well. So we have three reasonable reasons as councillors to put forward deferral. I don't think they're unreasonable to ask for more information on this. And I don't mind coming back to the next meeting as well and replace Joy again to actually come and decide.
So I'm gonna make my statement, then I'll move it to the Councillor 10.
Point of clarity. Notionally, this could, I think the timing would still allow it to come back to the January committee. Dependent. Let me finish. Sorry. It could notionally come back to the January committee. We're preparing reports now and in between, well, 6th of January. The other site certainly will not come to committee in January. So I suppose what I'm saying is, in terms of managing expectations, there is potential for this to come back in January, but the other site, no way in the world it would come in January. But just
right. So we've had a number of issues raised. I've raised 3. Construction management plan. We've got no idea what that's going to be, and operating hours. The lighting was another issue for me. The trees, the planting on the buffer area. Councillor Napton's raised the issue of, I'll come back in a minute, the footpath. Councillor Baker's raised the issue, and I have, about the use of the car parks after hours, etc. Councillor Taylor's got 1 or 2 issues. Councillor Burr's got issues. And I'm going to go back to earlier this morning when we said about Stillington. There were little things that the committee felt would make it easier for them to grant that permission, and I think that's where we are now. We're trying to find all the things, get all the ducks in a row that says when it comes back, because in principle I don't have a huge issue with this. In principle, I'm supportive. It fits with the plans. It fits with the Rydale plan. It fits with the Helmsley plan. I know there are issues the community have raised about the highways issues. It fits with those plans. And even if more housing comes forward, it's still part of the plans. It was always meant to be employment land in that bit, residential land for development in that bit. for me, there isn't an issue with that. It is what it is. But I think there are little things that we've said we'd quite like to get a handle on it all. And I think it does make sense for us to go back to the applicant and say X, Y, Z, A, B, C, and then we bring it back to the next meeting and then we're clear. We're clear what we want, we're clear what we've got, and we can say yes or no. Councillor Napton.
Yeah, so just one quick one. Could we also get some clarity on third-party lettings, both on an evening and at weekends? I'm not against them. I mean, I've used that, and the Society of Local Council Clerks have used it. But I just wanted to, just for openness, that we understand that if they're going to be Saturday morning lettings for groups and evening lettings for, say, the town council and that, just so that everybody's clear.
Apologies, I forgot a question earlier. You mentioned the trees along the front of the property, and we would be seeking to put in as much established as possible. Is that right? Is that conditioned then? Is it? Yeah. Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Sorry, that was part of their landscape plan, so that was a condition of the recommendation.
Right. It's been moved and seconded for deferment. We'll go to the vote. Those for? Okay. Unanimous. Deferred. Right. I have no other business. Microphone, please.
Site visit in the light of the new, what's it called? MPPF. Please could I request that we have some training in that, please, at some point. Thank you very much.
Right, so I have no other business except to say thank you to the general public for coming and listening to the debate, and to wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. The same to my fellow councillors and my officers. I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I'll see you in the new year, and the meeting is scheduled for Thursday, the 16th of January. Thank you very much, everybody. 16th. No, but
Mostly around how
no, but you have to publish. 16th.
plan making.
Yeah.
So the whole 5-year land supply question is sort of.
So we've got half of England's land supply, haven't we? To build, yeah. Right. Can you remember those heady days when we were only here for 20 minutes?
Yeah, we've done it.
I did say to you.
Yeah. So I'm not going to make my funeral at 2 o'clock in Thirsk, am I?
90%.
I've asked Gareth to represent me. Right, I'm going to go to the Emma Bridgewater shop because my son's asked me to go. Mike's